Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, Trevor?
What is going on? And Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I am doing great.
Excellent, excellent. We're doing a special movie of the year, film of the year episode today. We're going to kind of be discussing our favorite movies of 2022. And as we typically do in our end of the year stuff, coming up with kind of our site-wide top 10 rankings. So should be a fun episode there. Before we hop into that, though, a little bit of housekeeping. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. General rules of these kinds of episodes, if you've never heard one of our like game of the year episodes before, is we've each kind of put together our top 10 of the year. We'll start out with any honorable mentions we want to give some love to, and we'll kind of go through turn by turn of our number 10s, number 9s, number 8s, so on and so forth. If we have a movie, like if I say I want to talk about this movie and it's my number 10 movie, but somebody else has it higher on the list, we're just going to kind of kick it down the line until it gets to like the highest person's list, when we will actually kind of discuss that movie. So we're not, I'm not talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once, and then Cameron's talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Logan's talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once. So that's kind of the gist of the show. So kicking things off with honorable mentions. I'll pull a couple in here to start things off. I want to give a little bit of love to Chippendale Rescue Rangers.
Okay.
I thoroughly enjoyed this Disney Plus
Very
movie.
important shout out. Okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
This is on my top 10.
It's on your top 10? All right.
Yep.
Well, we will discuss it in a little bit later. It just missed mine, is why I want to give that some love. I want to shout out Elvis, because I think Austin Butler's performance in that movie is very, very good, amidst a whole bunch of other middling stuff. Baz Luhrmann's direction is kind of meh, and the movie as a whole is like it's a very weird choice to frame it from Colonel Parker's perspective, and Tom Hanks is a very weird Colonel Parker, but Austin Butler is a really, really good Elvis. So I wanted to give a shout out to that. And I want to give a shout out to Lightyear. Didn't reach the
top.
It's in your top 10.
Let me double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's.
Yeah,
it's in my top 10.
Okay, then we will discuss a little bit further. Didn't quite make my top 10, but I think it is certainly better, even if it didn't reach the highs that we are used to from Pixar. So those are my honorable mentions. Cam, let me throw it over to you.
Yeah, sure. For my honorable mentions, I want to give a very special shout out to a film Trevor and I actually recently saw, which is Strange World. If you want to listen to that D Plus show, it is a peculiar movie that, once again, like we talked about it before, the marketing for that film was borderline non-existent, and does not deliver on what kind of movie that actually is. I highly suggest people go check it out, especially since it's on Disney Plus. And then after that, I would say the next one on my list is Bones and All. Bones and All is startingly. I don't think that's the right word. I'm thinking
Startlingly.
Thank you. Startlingly.
You're missing an L in there.
Yeah.
Startling.
Really interesting film, and it is a very peculiar look at and take on the idea of like vampire in a way. It's very fascinating. If you have ever been a fan of a show or a manga / comic book like Tokyo Ghoul, there's a lot of fascinating kind of I won't say direct inspirations, but there's a lot of like interesting things going on with it. I know that it was a novel before but I haven't read the novel before. But it's a very fascinating thing, and the concept of Bones and All is the way it's introduced and the way that it how it ends up playing into it is quite fascinating. So, I'm actually interested in reading I'm interested in reading the book at some point, but there's that, and then also Turning Red. Turning Red's not on my top 10. Is it on anybody else's?
It is on mine. Yeah.
Okay. The only thing I'll say about that is this is the movie that I'm going to give the award to of like I need to watch it again without like a bunch of people around talking, because it definitely hurt the experience that I had in watching the film, and I just haven't gotten back around to watching it. So it missed my top 10. What I do like can recall and everything is really enjoyable, but I do need to like hop back.
Fair enough. Shout out. I didn't even put Strange World in my rankings because we watched it here in 2023, and I didn't factor in as a 2022 movie, but it also would probably be an honorable mention of mine as well. Yeah, not nearly as bad as like the Disney marketing kind of pushed it out to be, but also doesn't crack the top 10 there. All right, Logan, let's throw it to you for any honorable mentions you have.
Yeah, I think, first off, I would be remiss if I didn't, in this roundup of 2022 movies, give a shout out to rewatching all 25 Bond movies, right, that me and Trevor did for that Bond show, because
I was like, there wasn't a Bond movie, so I know that's not going to be in, but there it is. Yeah.
But like, I found a way, Trevor, don't doubt me. But yeah, like, I do think that that was such a big element of this year in movies for me, especially in the first half of the year. Obviously, I love James Bond. There's literally thousands and thousands of things you can find on the internet about me loving James Bond. But a lot of those movies I hadn't seen in years and years and years, right? I hadn't done a James Bond rewatch of all the movies since Skyfall came out in 2012, right? And so it was sort of fun just getting to watch these movies again and kind of fall in love with new ones and maybe fall out of love with old ones, but just like have a great time throughout the journey. Getting to do that with you was also really a blast, Trevor, and Cameron and Frank were also on it as well. And it's just a great time talking about James Bond. And then also because after we ended that series, during Christmas break, right? Like I watched like 6 or 7 of them just over like a week because I just wanted to do it, right? And so it was sort of fun to like fall in love with that series of films again. So I did want to give that a shout out. If I can find a way to talk about James Bond, I will. Outside of that, like my honorable mentions are like a weird gamut of films like that I like and also films that I don't like, right? Like I want to shout out Multiverse of Madness because it's probably my least favorite film I saw this year. But I wanted to shout it out because I think it's super weird and I like
it is
a
in my
fair
top
amount.
10.
Oh, is it really? Okay, I'll save it for that then.
Cool.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Then we'll save it for that. Okay, well then yeah, we'll hop around. I can't imagine anyone has Hocus Pocus 2 in their top 10. Okay.
No. Yeah.
Hocus Pocus 2, me and Cameron obviously had our thoughts. We didn't like it as much. But I do think it's still fun to kind of be in that world again, if that makes sense. And just the original trio of witches, they do have just such charm to them, right? And it was like a great Halloween D+ episode we did around that. We should check out. But obviously not quite good enough to be in the top 10 for the year, but was a fun time. I also have Disenchanted in my top 10. Or not in my top 10, in my honorable mentions. I don't think anyone has it in their top 10.
No.
Okay, so I still haven't seen the original Enchanted, but I really like Disenchanted a lot, actually. I was very pleasantly surprised by how much I really dug and like vibed with that movie. There are some weird, quirky things, and like I feel like I will only enjoy the first one so much more than the second one. But Disenchanted was still a lot of fun, and it's goofy and it's silly, and it is like a great weekday movie to watch, right? Just like something chill and fun after work to watch. So I like Disenchanted. I did want to give a very conflicted shout out to Death on the Nile, which I think works approximately like 50% of the time in like a really engaging, fun way that like I sort of almost like more than Kenneth Branagh's Murder on the Orient Express movie that he did a couple years prior. The problem with Death on the Nile that holds it back a significant amount is that Armie Hammer is not just in the movie, he is a integral part of that film. And anytime Armie Hammer is on screen, it's just like, oh, that is Armie Hammer. And it is completely jarring and it just sort of stops everything in its tracks. And I absolutely understand why they talked about possibly like filming around that and like, doing, reshoots. And I also understand why they didn't, because it would have just been filming a whole new movie. But yeah, it is a really fun, stylish detective story, and not quite to the heights of another detective story we'll talk a little bit later on in this podcast. But it's really fun. I love Kenneth Branagh. I'm a sucker for him. I've been a sucker for him for literally my whole life. And so I do think it's a lot of fun. It's got a more satisfying ending than I think Murder on the Orient Express has for me personally. But yeah, the Army Hammer-ness of it, unfortunately, just keeps it out of my top 10.
Is it just because like you also can't forget that mustache photo of his?
Oh, what's the of Army Hammer?
Yeah, it's like he DM'd some gal a photo of him looking like a total serial killer, and he had like this thick fat mustache above his lip.
Not
and
even,
it was just
I mean,
and every time anybody says
general...
Army Hammer, all I can think of is that.
I
and also him saying like how much he wanted to eat.
When I
somebody.
think of Army Hammer, is more of what I think of is that he's maybe a cannibal.
The eating people thing, but I associate.
Yeah, no, that's the much more thing. I think people. The fact that you're really hung up on a mustache is weird compared
the
to
mustache.
Cam.
That's particular of note in that photo, but that photo came out at the same time as the cannibal stuff, and so the two of them, as I was about to say, are inextricably linked. I cannot separate the two of them.
The one from the other.
So when he comes up, I think of that photo, and then I immediately think of the cannibalism.
Yeah. I don't have the photo as a reference, so
just the
still cannibalism is the number one,
it's
which
the winner.
I think probably should still be your number one too.
It should be. It's not. It's wrong. But then again, I also know a lot about other cannibals, so it's
cool. Logan, back to you.
The last.
I literally shouted out Bones and all in my shout out movies. I'm sorry. It's been that's been on my mind.
The last movie that I wanted to give a shout out to is Liger, which is a Bollywood-Tollywood film. It is, by any objective standard, not a good movie. Just not a good film at all. But it is a great Rocky Horror Picture Show-esque experience, right? To just have around with friends and just sort of like riff on it and make fun of how terrible it is. And it's goofy and it's absurd and it's like a boxing movie ostensibly, but it's way more than that because of course it is. And yeah, it's dumb, it's goofy, it's silly. It is the experience I had most similar to watching Diamonds Are Forever earlier this year with Trevor. Like, it's just a great time to just kind of riff on a movie with. Cameron, question.
Is it called Liger because the character happens to be like half Hindi and half Muslim?
No.
Even
it's something stupid like.
It's not something like politically charged or interesting or fascinating.
No, not at all. It's like his nickname is Liger because like his dad was called the Lion and then his mom is like the Tiger, or like vice versa, something like that. And they Liger, right? Like the thing.
That's disappointing.
There's a lot disappointing in the film movie, so don't worry, you're set. But yeah, Mike Tyson's in the film, but for whatever reason they like changed his name, so he's like Stan Ross instead of like Mike Tyson or some other like dumb generic name like that. And it's like there's so much going on, and it's a ridiculously stupid time, but it's pretty fun. Definitely not top 10 worthy, but definitely noteworthy enough.
All right. Of your honorable mentions, I did have Hocus Pocus 2 and Disenchanted in my honorable mentions as well. Nice. They're just like, the long overdue legacy sequels didn't quite live up to their predecessors.
Sure.
But yeah. All right. Then let us dive into our top 10s. I will go ahead and kick things off, and this might be higher up on somebody's list. My number 10 is Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
It is higher on my list.
I thought it might be.
Okay,
Cameron.
well.
All right, then we'll throw it over to you, Cam. What's your number 10?
My number 10 is Nope.
Nope.
It's higher on my list.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then number 10 to you, Logan.
Let me pull it back up. My number 10 is going to be, it's probably, I know for a fact it's higher on one of your all's list. It's going to be Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers.
All right. And that is correct. Still higher on your list there, Cameron?
That is correct.
All right. Then quick round 10s.
Quick round 10, guys. Quick round 10s.
We will dive into all of those movies a little bit later. Round number 9. My number 9 movie is Uncharted. Did anybody else catch that movie this year?
Nope.
All right. Nope. Uncharted, it's It is not a great movie. In my overall ranking, I have it in probably like the good tier of movies. But I had a fun time with it. It is much like National Treasure has been on the mind a lot recently because we did that D Plus show on it. It is very much in that style and spirit of the movies. Obviously heavily influenced and driven by the Uncharted games themselves. The movie, a lot of fun. In particular, the actress who plays Chloe is really great. She's a fun standout. Sophia Ali, I believe, is the actress's name. The weakest elements of the movie end up being that Tom Holland is just weirdly too young to be playing Nathan Drake, and Mark Wahlberg is just Mark Wahlberg the entire time and is not great as Sully. But Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg have like good fun chemistry together. The action's fun. A lot of the set pieces from the movie are pulled straight from the games, but the ones like where they even let the movie just kind of be its own thing are still fun. And there's in particular, like the second act of the movie has like a very like treasure hunting sequence that is like the puzzle solving aspect of the games in a fun and engaging way, a la the Indiana Jones and National Treasure kind of stuff, and is a lot of fun. It's disappointing then that like Chloe Fraser kind of gets pulled out of the third act of the movie, and it kind of gets brought back to the nothing villain. But it was still a fun time. So shout out to Uncharted being my number 9 movie on the list.
It is. I forgot to mention this. I had like a list of like important films I haven't seen yet. Uncharted was on that list of like I haven't seen Uncharted. I'm sure I will like Uncharted. But yes, I haven't got around to checking out Uncharted yet.
Yeah, it's definitely like it's a fun time. I think it's on Netflix, so go knock out a couple hours on it. It's very much kind of as you often describe, Logan. It's the like throw it on a Saturday,
yeah,
kind
I
of
love that
just
kind of movie,
and do other things while it's on in the background kind of movie. Also, Antonio Banderas is in it in a somewhat fun role, and then also just very much kind of vanishes throughout the movie. So. It's a weird thing to see him pop up, but all right. Cameron, how about you? What is your number 9?
So my number 9 is Thor: Love and Thunder.
Thor: Love and
Weirdly
Thunder.
enough, that is exactly my number 9 as well.
All right. Did not make my top 10, so I will leave to you guys to discuss it here then.
Okay, so Thor: Love and Thunder is a follow-up to one of my favorite films of all time, Thor: Ragnarok. I had a lot of high hopes for this movie, and after seeing it, I realized if you want to listen to the spoiler cast, Trevor and I did. If like, I also think we did it again for D Plus show. We did a double helping on that, so I don't need to go into too much detail. If you want like thorough detail, watch either of those. Both the initial launch and then also my reflection on D Plus. But the reality is that there's no way this film for me could have followed up Ragnarok appropriately, because Ragnarok is such a disproportionate movie. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It's my favorite Marvel film. It's also connected to like intrinsic, really fun memory of seeing it in theaters with Trevor and Logan and all like a bunch of our other friends. It holds such a special place for me. So of course, Love and Thunder wasn't going to reach the heights of those heights. It just couldn't. And it was unrealistic to have expected that. I think that there are other problems in the film as far as like pacing and timing, but I do want to give an enormous shout out to the performances. I think the reintroduction of Jane Foster and like kind of like her arc and her progression as she's reintroduced to the franchise is like rocky at certain parts, but overall I really appreciate her earnestness in wanting to be the best Thor she can. And how it ties into other things about what's going on in her arc, and also kind of bringing Thor's like maturation full circle. Because he is a god, he's always going to be a god, and he's always going to have that kind of like that life of like he's not going to all of a sudden turn into a different character. He's always going to be Thor, and I like how that Love and Thunder does establish that, but it shows us that Thor can still find ways to grow. He can find ways and make decisions that, if you really compare the end of Love and Thunder, not the very end, but like the last, like scene with like, post the big fight, Thor makes choices in that moment that Thor never would have made in a million years at the beginning of the first Thor movie.
Mhm.
And it's not just writing, it's just this entire character arc that's carried over and really culminates in Love and Thunder. And also I love all the stories that we found out from like the shooting of Love and Thunder, like about how all the kids in the film are actually the kids of the actors and crew and cast and everybody. That it's so much fun to see this idea of Thor's mythos continuing and having like a bigger effect with like New Asgard, the kids, this idea of like, yeah, like some stories are being done and some stories are going to continue forward, and how is that going to go? And there's a greater mystery to Valhalla now that's been introduced. There's a lot of like interesting stuff going on, and I think that overall, though, it's still like really well shot. It has some rough pacing, but it still has a lot of funny jokes. It still has like a good earnest heart behind it with Taika Waititi. Still like carrying that level of like him as a director and writer into this. But overall, the impossible heights that it could not possibly reach is what it ends up.
I definitely think that's an element, right? Like, I definitely think that no matter what Love and Thunder would have done, it would have been hard pressed to match the quality of Ragnarok, right? Like, there's a reason why sequels that match the first one are, so kind of historic and renowned, right? There's a reason why like Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi are sort of the exceptions, or Godfather Part 2 is the exception, right? But I do like how you described it a lot, Cam, right? I think if Thor Love and Thunder is the last we ever get of Chris Hemsworth as Thor, I'd be totally content with that. I'd be totally happy with that ending for that character. Right? Like, in some ways, I mean, actually, in a lot of ways, it's a much more natural ending for him than Thor Ragnarok would have been in terms of like his actual named movies, right? That ends on a cliffhanger, right? And so I think to kind of get him that moment of fulfillment that we got with Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man or Chris Evans as Captain America, like feels right for that character. Like, whether or not it will be his last one is obviously up in the air. But I do think it's a good natural ending point if it is. And I think I've said it before. I mean, like we've done a lot of podcasts on this one, but like I think the humor is kind of a bit uneven all over the place. But I do think that, if the worst you can say about Love and Thunder is that it's the second best Thor movie, that's still pretty good, right? Like, and that still means it's just behind one of the like 4 or 5 best MCU movies, right? I think. So it is a step down, and I think expectations kind of maybe played an unfair role in it. Like, if this had come out first and then Ragnarok, how we have viewed them, I think would be much different. But it's certainly, one of the better MCU things we got this year, in movies or TV shows. And yeah, I mean, I think it is mid-pack in the MCU, but there's a lot of good in the MCU. There's a lot of bad in the MCU, as we'll touch on for sure a little bit later on, it sounds like, with Multiverse of Madness. But there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad and there's a lot of mid stuff. And I think it's totally respectable to be like, this is a good MCU movie. And I think that's Thor Love and Thunder in a nutshell.
Yeah, just to throw in my thoughts, it very much fell in the disappointing but fine category that I have in my tiered segments of the list. I enjoyed it. It very much was the joy that Thor Ragnarok gave us was it was such a new, fresh take, and this is that take again, but also kind of unhinged, unedited. Like it didn't have somebody being like, okay, Taika, maybe reel it in a little bit.
Right.
And so it is so all over the place. And I think it ends up very tonally conflicting with itself a lot. The story a lot of times is a heavier story than the 30 jokes a minute is letting you feel and stuff like that. So I think the movie kind of is at odds with itself a lot. But Christian Bale's great. We don't like
God,
it is disappointing that we don't get to see Gore God butchering as much as he should be God butchering. But the intensity and performance that Bale brings was like a really good, fun flavor to and foil to Thor. And yeah, I think there's still great chemistry among a lot of the rest of the cast as well. But yeah, did not crack my top 10. So there we go. But it gets the double nines from you guys. Well, continuing on into number 8, we'll stick with MCU-ness for a bit because I have Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, but I imagine that's going to be higher on at least.
Weirdly enough, also matches my number 8 as well. I'm on a roll here.
All right, Cam, is it still higher on your list then?
It is higher.
All right, then we will discuss Black Panther: Wakanda Forever in a little bit. Cameron, what is your number 8?
So actually, you know what? It is a good time to do that with it. Wakanda Forever it's tied at my 8. I really.
Okay.
We're talking about it.
So
sorry, I don't have my glasses on, so I didn't read that right. I
do
apologize.
you have 2 number 8s then?
I have they're 7/8.
Okay.
So yeah, Wakanda Forever is tied for my 7th/8th place.
It's okay, yeah.
7th place is Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Gotcha. All right. Then let's talk Wakanda Forever. I'll throw it to you, Cameron, for since you kind of had it there at 7th. What do you want to kick off with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever? We're here in the MCU block of the episode.
I know, right?
Wakanda Forever is a movie that I cannot imagine the difficulty in making this film. The weight that this movie carries with it inherently just by existing is tremendous. And the way that it acknowledges that, and the way that it handles that, and the way that it has changed what I found out from interviews later, it covers this. Thematically, it didn't change the film all that much because it was still going to be about loss and grief and losing time and losing opportunities. And the way they handle it is so incredibly well done. The 2 top leads being Black women top 3 leads of this film are Black women is incredible. The way they handle Namor is impeccable. The idea of taking Atlantis, which has in comics and media been such a strong Mediterranean European aspected imagination, piece of imagination, because it does come from Greek mythos. And for them to take that and then apply everything that's in the MCU about Atlantis and Namor and translate it so flawlessly to Aztec, to Mesoamerican, and the way that it connects so deeply with things like Quetzalcoatl and the Mesoamerican religious mythos is impeccable. It's so well done. It is not higher on my list because it is just it's a difficult film at certain points. It has its ups and downs. It has its kind of pacing issues at some point. But I think the thing I love most about this film is, outside of the just tremendous weight and emotion around it, is the kind of political intrigue that's going on in the film. The fact that it's about geopolitical efforts, and the film starts off with Wakanda needing to essentially assert itself on the world stage after the loss of T'Challa. And it does, and how are they going to bounce back now that they quote unquote don't have a Black Panther anymore? How do you how does Wakanda defend itself? And the way that Shuri's journey in the film especially is such a massive point of interest, and there's some things that I think work and don't work as far as the kind of science and everything going on during her story. I think sometimes the Ironheart stuff got really lost in the film overall. And kind of having Ironheart be kind of a MacGuffin for the first half of the film, and then kind of just an ancillary poker chip in the geopolitical stuff at the last half of the film is a bit not frustrating. It's a bit disappointing that there wasn't more going on. And then I think also the fight at the end of the film, the army fighting at the end of the film between the two armies, was not as like there are some logistical like I don't know about that. Like that didn't really work with me or work for me. Um, but the fight between Namor and Shuri is top tier. It's such a good fight. It's brutal, and like her Shuri's rage is just so potent in that fight, and it's fantastic. Um there's I just wish there had been more of that fight than the big armies fight at certain times. Overall though, like I think it's a great movie. It's definitely on the top 10 of my list for a reason. Um and when I talk about the other film on my like that it tied with, I think you'll understand, because I think some people will be like, why would you like Wakanda Forever and Multiverse of Madness tied? Like, Cameron, what's wrong with you? I'll get into that in a little bit, but I'll let you guys talk about Wakanda Forever.
I do think it's interesting that so much of what you like about the movie is what I don't like about it. The movie for me works in spite of Letty Wright's character, I'm sure, right? Like, I think she's easily the weakest part of the film for me. Like, if I could remove one aspect of the film, it would be her entire character. Like, none of it works for me at any point in the film. Whereas like the Namora stuff, I think I agree with you on that, is like phenomenal, right? Like I just want like a movie of just him doing his own shit now. Like, he is such a multifaceted, interesting, complex villain, who's so layered, right? And I think if there's one thing Black Panther has done really well, I think it has been its villains. I think with Killmonger and Namor are both easily among the best of the MCU villains, which might be damning with faint praise a little bit, but they're just so special and so stand out. And his whole backstory and the like little flashback vignette we get of him as like a child, like emerging from the water, just mowing down like that entire like Spanish villager scene is great. And there's such an element of tragedy to him, right? And he carries his grief in a way more effective and convincing way for me than Shuri ever did. Right. And like it gets complicated because like obviously everyone can grieve however they want to grieve, but just from a storytelling perspective, like none of the beats landed the way it was supposed to. And that carried over to like when the Queen spoiler when the Queen dies in movie 2, like that was another beat that just totally didn't land for me, right? Like I was still like processing T'Challa's death, and then that she also dies. I'm just kind of like, you're not in this enough for me to like feel that, because I didn't really like her character beats anyway. Like most of the Wakanda stuff didn't work for me, and it was all the elements outside of that that I really liked, right? So like I actually liked Ironheart. I wish we had more of her and more of her doing stuff in the film. I agree with that element for sure, because she is so severely underutilized, like apart from like her kind of pop in the second act there. I do agree that the final fight with Shuri and Namor is great. I just wish it made sense, right? Like it feels like all the things that are happening like don't really like. She gets stabbed. Let's not forget that. And then like just like totally brushes it off in like 5 seconds and just fucking like going out again. And it's like, I wish that mattered, right? And like that was like an important beat. Like I don't know. None of those real beats of with the Wakanda characters worked for me. And I think the movie sort of works in spite of it, because it's still just so beautiful and it has such a distinct visual style, right? And I think it along with the first Black Panther are probably among the movies in the MCU that I could most just look at, I think, and just enjoy the world they're in and the characters they're in and the environments they're in. They're just beautiful. And again, it's soundtrack, if not quite to the heights. The first one is still fantastic, again, especially by MCU standards. So like so much of the film outside of that works for me, but kind of the beating heart of the film, which is supposed to be Shuri and her journey of grief and all that kind of stuff, just doesn't. It lands so flat for me. And so that's why it's not any higher on my list, but it's still, in spite of those issues, my favorite MCU movie for the year. If not my favorite MCU property. Shout out Miss Marvel and She-Hulk.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what's already been said. I think Letitia Wright is good in the role. I don't I don't like that she's playing rage pretty
Yeah,
much the
the whole
entire movie.
movie.
Like I would like to have seen her, and I think she could have played with more different flavors of that in the way that Angela Bassett's character does.
Hmm.
Um, but still, it's. I mean, it is very much like Cameron said. It was an impossible task of a movie to kind of like have to
Can't imagine.
completely write around your main character passing and incorporating that into the story as well. I think a lot of the Namor stuff is really great. I want to give a special shout out to like the introduction scene to like the Talokan like soldiers,
Hmm.
where the movie just kind of turns into a horror movie on a ship for a little while,
Great.
and you have like the cool siren song ability that they have that just makes people jump off to their deaths. Um, but yeah, all the Talokan and Namor stuff is really cool. The way they incorporated all the Mesoamerica stuff. The weakest elements for me end up being a lot of what I've repeatedly kind of described as the Age of Ultron effect of this movie. Of all right, here's the Everett Ross character and the Julia Louis-Dreyfus character, and we're gonna kind of show how they're tied into this, and we're going to bring in Ironheart, but not really to serve this movie, more so to introduce her for the Disney Plus show eventually and stuff like that. It's doing that thing that kind of reached its peak there at Age of Ultron of we're going to put pieces in place for future beats that don't really pay off particularly well in this movie. I would much rather have just kind of like stayed focused on the Wakanda versus Talokan kind of conflict that we saw,
Right.
mixed in with like the the other world leaders wanting to get their hands on vibranium and stuff like that. And yeah, it was certainly, I think, for me, a weak year in the
I agree.
MCU films, especially that this, which is certainly the standout of the MCU for me. Obviously, Cameron's going to have multiverse, in this kind of same point. Whereas I do think that the TV side of things, which we don't really have a best of planned, but yeah, Miss Marvel was really great. I really like She-Hulk.
So
Like
good, yeah.
it was a good year on
Mhm.
the TV side of Marvel,
Agreed.
and I'll be curious to see kind of where 2023 goes with like Loki season 2, but then also on the movie side of things, we have Quantum Mania coming up. We have the Guardians of the Galaxy 3. We have the Miss Marvels, or the Marvels, I guess. It'll be interesting to see if Phase 5 starts to rebound, whereas Phase 4 very much felt directionless for
Right.
so much of that phase, and just kind of like a whole bunch of disparate stories that aren't really building to anything. And Wakanda Forever was very much in that vein. It's very much a isolated standalone story. I have no idea how it's going to play into anything else that really happens, but still great performances, and a I think especially like one of the things we talked about a lot when we did like our summer of Star Wars was how badly Rise of Skywalker handled the passing of Carrie Fisher and the legacy of
Awful.
the reality of that situation.
Right.
And I think this leaps and bounds is a better approach than that,
Oh, sure.
of basically being like, he's gone. We're going to do away with that in the opening scene. And this is going to be about our characters dealing with that, as opposed to let's take found footage from the outtakes of the last movie and try and work. Yeah, that just did not work in Rise of Skywalker at all. So thanks to hey, at least Disney learned from their mistakes on that front. But all right, so that is our number 8,
Our collective number 8. Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, our overall collective number 8.
But weirdly will not be number 8 on the list, probably.
Yeah, no. Number 7 for me, which I think may still be higher on your list, Logan, maybe, would be Turning Red. I don't know if you do have it up there.
It's not even in my top 10.
Oh, it's not in your top 10. All right.
And you guys, I have to apologize. In my haste in making my list, I did.
You fucked things up.
I fucked things up. So Nope is no longer in my top 10.
Okay. All right. So then what did so Wakanda Forever was actually your number 9?
No, it was. I'll just say it was my number 8 because I do put it over Doctor Strange. Well, it's my 8/9 instead. There we go.
Okay.
So it's still 8. We're still good.
Okay. And so Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is number 9 then?
They're both, but yes, they're tied.
I mean, we're moving down to number 7 now, so we've passed the 7 on your list at this point. So we need to circle back to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness then. So talk about Multiverse of Madness, or do you want to look at your list some more and realize that you do have 7 more movies to talk about after this?
Oh, I still have 7 more movies to talk about after this.
Okay.
That's
just to double check, Cameron. Let's do it this way. What is your number 10? Just to be sure.
Number 10 is now Thor: Love and Thunder. Number 8/9 is Wakanda Forever and Doctor Strange. Number 7 is my next one.
Okay.
So
then
so we should do Multiverse of Madness,
Doctor Strange
right?
and Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I used the number my items for me, and I didn't have my glasses on, and so this is just.
I just used Letterboxd. It made it really simple.
Yeah, I should have done that. So yeah, Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness. We've talked about it twice already, so I will summarize it by just saying I'm a massive Sam Raimi fan. All the things that people don't like about this movie that are like Sam Raimi oriented in the horror kind of aspect of it, I'm a big fan of. I'm a big schlocky kind of horror kind of guy. I like the comedy, like a lot of the Sam Raimi-ness about this film that didn't hit for people. Absolutely knocked it out of the park for me. I think the multiverse aspect of showing off like the council, like the Supreme Council of that other world as a way of like introducing also the idea of mutants. And when the song comes on when Dr. X or Professor X rolls in, Dr. Reed Richards being like all the casting about it's perfect. All the kind of like things they bring in to kind of like reemphasize like this like, hey, we can do these properties better than you've previously seen them in some ways. Like when it comes to Black Lightning and
Black Bolt.
Sorry. Black
Lightning is the DC.
Is DC, yeah. Sorry about that. Black Bolt.
Also, I don't know if they did him better.
They did it better.
I mean,
it was better. As somebody who's watched the.
Did you watch the Inhumans? Because I've watched the Inhumans.
I watched the Inhumans when it like debuted.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great, but it's also like gives him more to do than the brief little bit that we get here.
Also, not to like derail this too much, but like I would fundamentally disagree. They did like that version of Professor X better than the Professor X we've seen in like the X.
Oh, I wouldn't say it's better. I just said it was it was a good introduction of the idea of mutants being a thing that we can just like be like, yeah, mutants are a thing and move on.
We both jumped in because you said they did these characters better than we've seen them before. So
sorry, I was not referencing Professor X in that. I was referencing Black Bolt specifically.
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Black Bolt, and I like a live action or Captain Carter versus. I was not a fan of the What Ifs verse quite a bit. And so I liked seeing the reprisal of Captain Carter and showing her off here. I like that a lot more than what we saw before. So yeah, like that's what I was referring to, those two characters, not Professor X. Obviously, Professor X in like some of the X-Men films is fantastic. Mm-hmm. But that being said, yeah, overall, like I really love it. Are there problems with this film? Absolutely. But could we, like, it also came out at a really rough time because a lot of people saw a film that's higher up on all of our lists, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And it's like, oh, that's a better multiverse idea than what they did.
That's what you do in the multiverse.
Than the Multiverse of Madness. That's way better.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, and like, rough timing, but when it comes to it overall, I like Doctor Strange. I like kind of weird, like we also have like this, I guess you could call it like a delayed sequel for the first Doctor Strange film. Since like the first Doctor Strange film came out like more than a decade ago.
Or more than a decade ago. That can't be right. More than a decade ago.
Not more than a decade. How long ago? 5, 6 years?
We're in 2013 or 2023 right now, right? It couldn't have been that long. It was like 2017, Trevor. He'll fact check that for us.
Doctor Strange 2016.
Right. 2016.
Yeah. So.
Feels like a decade.
It does feel like a decade ago. I will give you that.
Yeah. But
No,
yeah,
I mean,
I think that this film overall, like, it works for me on a lot of levels, and I get that it doesn't work for a lot of other people, but like, I'm also somebody that, like, you put on the Evil Dead Part 2 or Army of Darkness or just like the show itself, like, I'll sit down, I'll watch the hell out of it. And also like Drag Me to Hell, which also had some like awesome callbacks to that film that not a lot of people have seen. Um, Once again, like Sam Raimi, I love his schlocky horror stuff, and that's why it ranks up there. Like, this was a dream come true getting Sam Raimi to direct this. It was awesome.
So I also love Sam Raimi. I also love Evil, really everything he's done. And again, I mean, I adore Spider-Man 2 is still probably one of my top 4 favorite superhero movies ever. I think that's just like a phenomenal film. I'm a big Sam Raimi guy as well. I don't necessarily have an issue with the schlocky horrorness of this movie. If anything, I don't think this movie is really schlocky horror-y enough. My issue with the movie is Wanda doesn't work for me, right? Like, that's the main issue. Is like Wanda doesn't work, and even more so than in Black Panther 2, Wanda is the entire movie. This is not a Doctor Strange movie in so many ways. This is a Wanda movie in more ways than it is Doctor Strange at times, and she just doesn't work, right? Like, especially because of like where that character is left off when we've last seen it, which would be WandaVision. And then we cut to this and it's like, well, that's not where you were just at, right? And like, this seems like not really how like the like emotional arc of that went. And then just like how cartoonishly evil she is. Like, and then like her getting like a moment of like, none of it works. None of it works. None of it works for me. Like, and the more like, Doctor Strange is like the sort of movie for me in Multiple Madness where like the more I think about it, the more I think I actively dislike it, right? Like, I was just looking at my MC ranking earlier today when I was doing my like letterbox on all the movies from 2022, and I was like, honestly, like, I think I like this less than Age of Ultron. I think I like this less than like a lot. Like, it just does not work for me. Like, it's in my like bottom 3 MC movies now. Like, it just, because so much of it doesn't work. And like Doctor Strange is, I think I said this in one of the, again, we did a lot of podcasts on this too, but like, I think I said it in one of the shows where it's like, Doctor Strange to me is a great example of a character who I think is a really good supporting character. But whenever he's the main character movie, I'm just sort of like, oh, I don't enjoy this as much. I want you to bounce off someone. And he doesn't really have anyone to bounce off of that's like on his level in a fun, quippy way or like back and forth kind of thing, like in No Way Home with Peter. Wanda is just sort of like, whatever. Doctor Strange is Doctor Strange. I don't get a lot of the schlocky horror vibes. I think it tries it, but doesn't really commit to it. I think the sequence of like, I think Multiverse of Madness makes an easy mistake to make, which is they make their villain so powerful that like, it's just sort of like, all right, but like now whatever you have to do to defeat her is going to be dumb. And it was dumb how they won. And I was like, I don't like this. I don't feel satisfied. And it sucks too, because like, I like Wanda a lot. I think she is, in most movies and stories she's in, such a key important character, right? Like, and one who gives so much extra depth to characters who could otherwise be really one note, where like Vision should not be an engaging character at all, but she gives him that kind of depth, I think, and she gives him that kind of heart. And I think she does it with a lot of the characters. I think her dynamic, like Captain America, right, is similarly like really good, but here it just doesn't work, and it sucks, and it's a shame. But yeah, it is. Like I said before we started to kind of get into this, like it'd be my like probably least favorite movie I've seen this year, which is such a disappointment because I also had pretty high, or at least somewhat high hopes for it going in.
Yeah, it was my weakest of the MCUs from this year in my overall ranking. It just ekes out above Black Adam in terms of like worst superhero movie for the year.
Black Adam, hell yeah.
In both of those, there are elements that I like,
Right.
but yeah, I think they do Wanda dirty, and I think it much like the like the Gore the God Butcher, they fail to like present the premise that they give you here with Multiverse of Madness. We get basically 3 multiverses, and they're all New York, and then like a 5-second like freeze frame through a whole bunch of multiverses.
Right.
Like the joke that went around of like one of them is New York, but red and green are switched. Okay. I'm not a huge Sam Raimi fan, so a lot of that stuff also just doesn't work for me. It's fun seeing Bruce Campbell pop up and stuff, and shout out to the pizza papa, but like that's such a like just a dumb thing. I will say I found a greater appreciation for the movie when I watched the assembled of the making of kind of thing on Disney Plus. Because it's very much a movie that they turned in the first draft of the script, and then a week later, the world shut down to a pandemic. And basically, they had to completely rethink and rehandle how they were going to deal with the movie, and logistically and all that stuff. And getting to see a lot of that in the making of was like very fascinating stuff. And also, way more of the movie was practical than I was expecting. In particular, all of the stuff in the I forget the name of where the Doctor Strange and Wong are, like a lot of their stuff was like physical practical effects and stuff like that, which is cool to see. But yeah, it was largely very much a disappointment for me, in a lot of areas. Like fine enough spectacle, fun stunt casting with a lot of the cameos and stuff, but I disagree with you, Cameron, on I think a lot of those are there for they're I mean, so much it's obviously there to set up Wanda as the big bad. So I think a lot of those characters very much suffer compared to other iterations that we've seen of them, because they're there to serve the purpose of fodder for the enemy. But yeah, that's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
So now we're actually at number 7.
So now we're back to
Sorry
actually
about
at
that,
number
guys.
7.
No, you're totally fine.
So my number 7, which we cleared up or we established, is not on anybody, not higher on anybody else's list. But my number 7 is Turning Red. I'll be curious to see what you think about this, Cam, on a second viewing. Because Turning Red was my certainly my favorite Pixar thing of the year, favorite Disney thing of the year. I thought this was a really like wonderful story about family and May's story and friendship was really cool. It did the thing that I think like Brave did a number of years ago, where like it kind of hid what I was expecting the movie to be about.
Definitely, yeah.
Especially when it goes into like the third act weirdness. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. Watched it a couple times. Obviously, we did that D Plus show about it early in the year when it came out. It's like I'm sad that this one got the direct to Disney Plus route as opposed to Lightyear. I think this would have served better and would have been a cooler thing for audiences to see in theaters. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Especially a lot of the as we've kind of gotten this trend of Disney, this like paternal, maternal, like trauma as a theme, instead of just like genuine big bads. We're getting like, oh, like the family lineage and the stresses that we put upon one another is actually like the real villain for so many of our stories. I think is really cool that they continue to tell that. I think, especially for representation, it's a really cool story to get to see told. And there's, this weird little bit of nostalgia of it being, turn of the millennium,
right? 100%.
Like the boy band fan and all that stuff with Four Town. Why are there 5 guys if it's Four Town? Gotta love that kind of commentary on just the boy bandness. And so, yeah, I had a really good time with Turning Red. And I think lots of good performances, lots of good, especially like just in the little friend group. I think there's a lot of cool energy among that crew. And then, yeah, I really enjoyed the struggles that May has, but how she owns those struggles and kind of tries to use them to her advantage.
Yeah. I mean, I think Turning Red is literally my number 11, and it was Trevor mentioning Chippendale that bumped out of my top 10. So you can blame him for that. Anyone who's upset for me for not having it in my top 10. I ultimately think it just missed out of my top 10. Like I think the last act weirdness that you sort of alluded to probably is enough that pushes it out. Like it gets really weird in the last act. And I just don't think it quite pulls it off. But I love so much of like the first act of this movie. Like I think it's so cool. And I think putting you in that like Turn of the Millennium setting works so well. And like, I mean, probably just because of our age, but like I just fall into it immediately. I doesn't need any like extra push to get there. I think it's one of the best like groups of like family and friends or Pixar movie I've seen in a long time. Like they all work. Everyone gets like their moment to shine. Everyone gets a little beat. Like I love all of that stuff. Like in some ways, I wish this movie would have been, not felt the need to have there be like the supernatural gimmick and it just been like that kind of story. It almost would have been stronger for me, right? Like Inside Out. Or like I think I would have even liked that even more. Or like Up, right? And something like that vein. But they do what they do with it, and I think it works to a degree, and then the last act happens and it kind of gets a little wonky, but I think it's super charming. I think it's super fun. And it's a like I understand why it's like sort of an under discussed, under kind of appreciated Pixar movie in some ways because of how it was released and how it was handled, just like where we're at in the beginning part of the year. But I do think I would encourage people to rewatch it because whenever me and Trevor we did like 3 Pixar movies. I think earlier this year for like D+.
It was 4. It was like our February month. I think we did because we did
right.
like that. We did Luca, and then we did like early Pixar stuff.
Right, and like out of those ones, and especially out of like it and Luca, like in the time, I think I was like maybe slightly higher on Luca, but I think with like time, while recognizing the flaws that I have with Turning Red, especially the last act, like I do think I think about that one more, and it has like more to say, and so I definitely encourage people to go check it out because I do think it is like a really good movie.
Cool. Cam, you had it in honorable mentions. Anything you want to add?
Just I need to watch it again.
Cool.
I would definitely encourage it. Yeah, I want to too.
All right, Cam, hit me with your number 7.
All right, my number 7 is Chippendale Rescue Rangers.
That's my number 10. Trevor,
go ahead. It is not higher. It was an honorable mention for me. So
all right,
go ahead.
Right. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk Chippendale Rescue Rangers. Cam, lead us off.
Holy shit, what a film. Just an absolute little wonderful film that came out in the middle of the year. It was this was one of those movies that I watched with family where it was enhanced watching it with family, versus Turning Red, which I was like, Turning Red, I can't wait to watch it with like the kids and stuff. And like my nieces and nephew were just like super not into the movie because they didn't get any of the references or anything because they all came out before, like all those references are like pre when they were born. In regards to a lot of stuff, like, and like other stuff too about it. But in regards to this movie, it was just enhanced by that because their take on LA, like kind of Roger Rabbiting, like Roger Rabbit was about like LA in like the 50s or whatever, or like Roaring 20s, sometime within.
I mean, they played because of the noirness of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it gives a vibe of the 20s and 30s and stuff, but it was probably more like mid-century.
Yeah. So it is like taking that and then like making like a contemporary Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but instead it's about like intellectual property rights and the idea of like just all of it, like the idea of like, oh, you're angry. Like I thought you were angry because of the CGI, because I got the CGI treatment done. And it's so brilliantly well done on so many levels between the rotoscope, like the rotoscoping techniques they used for the digital, like the inserting of like the traditional 2D animation, and like all of that was done spectacularly. The way that they brought like the use of 2D and 3D graphics in a live action film culminated with this idea of it's a story about friendship and relationships and how they change over time, and just all of that just all being piled into this just wonderful little film that has just some outright hilarious moments, and especially a special shout out to Sonic with teeth.
Ugly Sonic,
Ugly
specifically.
Sonic. Ugly Sonic.
For the sake of legality, they had to obviously every time refer him as Ugly Sonic.
Yeah. Ugly Sonic is fantastic. But like the way that they're like, they made people ripping off Disney's intellectual IP the bad guys, and just like the way that they played with all of that, both making fun of the idea of copywriting like intellectual IP while at the same time like appeasing the overlords. Like the way they ran it as though like doing these parodies or like these like ripoffs of these regular films is somehow like the same as like human trafficking and drug dealing. They're ripping off Disney IP. Like the tongue in cheekness of all of that mixed with just everything else was just fantastic. Peter Pan being voiced by Will Arnett. So good. And like he got aged out. He got puberty hit him and he aged out. And it's like the child actor who turned into a crime boss. And the way that they just handle everything from beginning to end, it's just an absolute joy. My nieces and nephew that I watched it with just had an absolute blast. They still watch it every once in a while. Back when I was living with them. And so it was so much fun just to see kind of like this thing from my childhood, Rescue Rangers from my childhood, get introduced to these kids, and then they start watching the old cartoons, and it just like the meta experience that went along with this film is why it's ranked so highly.
Yeah, it very much was. It's my number 11, so it just missed my top 10. But it was such a joy to watch, and yeah, just like I very much look forward to when I'm like I want to have a double header of Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, and just have like a good time with this like meta commentary on animation and the history of animation, the politics of animation, stuff like that. I think there's so much fun to be had here, and yeah, it ends up like those are the shiny wrapping that like brought me in. It was like, oh, this is going to be funny, but then it ends up being a really solid, fun, like buddy cop kind of story, with all of that other stuff kind of there as nice little extra cushioning. But yeah, special shout out to Ugly Sonic and the just like ridiculously inspired choice that is. Shout out to Peter Pan growing up and becoming this horrible villain kind of thing, and yeah, just an all around good fun time. Always fun to see like the Lonely Island crew get to throw their weird sense of humor on things like this. Because I grew up in the era of Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, couldn't tell you a single plot of a single episode, anything like that. But like they were a staple of an era of time, and so like even that commentary on like our love of nostalgia and let's just kind of like bring everything we can back, and give it like a second life, was a fun little flavor to it. So shout out to that. Anything you want to add there, Logan?
I think the setting I watched in, right, watching it with like Shravia, Renee, and Andrea, right, like just watching with like friends and having a good time, and it just being a really charming, fun movie, right? Like, I mean, obviously, it is a spiritual successor to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but doing it in almost like millennial Gen X way, I found really great. And yeah, like I think there is just such a unabashed sincerity and earnestness to the movie too that it's sort of underappreciated, and like I think how much the people who made that movie clearly loved animated cartoons of like the 80s and like 70s and 60s and like the classic stuff, and how much fun they had with it, right? And I think that's present throughout, and I think that joy and kind of the infectious nature of getting to work with these kind of characters and properties kind of carries out the film, and I loved it for that as well.
Cool. Logan, let's wrap up with our number 7s. What's your number 7 on the list?
My number 7 is going to be Lightyear.
Okay.
I like Lightyear. Again, it's another one that I think with time I have grown to appreciate more, right? Like I think I like Lightyear partially too because to steal that Bond show reference, right, and paraphrase a little bit, like it knows exactly what it is, right? It knows exactly what kind of movie it is, and it doesn't try to, I think, overshoot it, right? Like Lightyear, if it came out 20 years ago, would have been like a direct-to-DVD movie, essentially. And I sort of like that it like sort of exists in this weird vibe still, and like an era of Pixar and Disney animated films that don't really exist anymore. Because like Trevor said, like it did get, put out in theaters, and Turning Red didn't, and it definitely should have been the opposite. But Lightyear, it is just charming and it is funny, and Chris Evans is a great Buzz, and the little like toy cat he has is fantastic, and I cannot give enough praise, like that being low-key one of the funniest characters in the year for films for me. And the entire group is great, and I think there is just such a level of like unpretentiousness to Lightyear, and like what it is, and the jokes it's making, and the charm it has, and the story it's telling. And it has a moment that like sort of tries to replicate Up a little bit with like his failed flight missions. And while it doesn't hit like the same emotional weight, it does still work when you get to kind of the end of that, scene. And I think it helps pay off how the movie ends, right? Like the movie didn't end the way I thought or expected it would at all, but it's probably a more authentic and honest ending for that character of Buzz than the ending I originally envisioned going in. And yeah, I really like Lightyear. I think it's super fun. I think it's super silly. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, but at this point, after like 30 years of these kind of movies, but also like emotionally mature, I think, and grounded in ultimately what the most important thing for those characters are.
Yeah, I had a good time with Lightyear. I think it's Pixar doing a action movie, which they've hit so many genres, like and they've had flavors of action, but this is like the first real true action, start to finish that they've really done. And I thought they had I definitely think they could not have done it animation wise, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, or something like that.
Right.
It is a weird, like, obviously they had a very hard time communicating what this was, how this ties into
super strange.
Like, so the fact that like that whole thing ends up just being like explained away with like a title card or two at the beginning of the movie of like, this is the movie that Andy saw when he was a kid. It's like, okay, sure. But if that was really true, then Socks would be the toy that everybody would have wanted, not Buzz. But it's still, a fun movie and certainly a fun experiment. Right. I think it would have been, I would have been more inclined to see it really live with Buzz missing time and being a man out of time that he is, as opposed to that very much kind of being like it's an inciting incident and then kind of is set aside. But yeah, it's still a fun good time. It's definitely going to be in the like, I don't really think about that Pixar movie a ton, but if I ever do, a full Pixar rewatch of stuff, I won't be mad when that one comes up compared to, The Good Dinosaur or something.
Give it time. You're probably going to get it, everyone. We've done Bond and Star Wars. We're narrowing in.
Yeah. Anything to add from you, Cam, on that one? Did you see Lightyear?
I did not see Lightyear. That's why I've been extremely quiet.
All right, cool.
No, yeah.
I want to let you guys have your time. You let me gush about Multiverse of Madness, even though you both really didn't like it. So I appreciate it.
All right.
Number 6.
Moving on to number 6. I believe I'm probably going to be the only one that has this one on my list, but it is Cyrano. I saw this, probably one of the first movies I saw this year. Cyrano is the classic Cyrano story, but with Peter Dinklage in the Cyrano role. And so they kind of they take the idea of it being like Cyrano's got a big nose and turn it into Cyrano is a dwarf. And Peter Dinklage is great. It is more of a movie musical than I was expecting. It's based on a play adaptation that had music from a few years ago that Peter Dinklage was in. Haley Bennett, who plays Roxanne, was in it. And yeah, it was just a very, very great retelling and reinterpretation of the Cyrano story. And Peter Dinklage is a delight to see in
Fantastic
the
in
like full of
anything, right.
witticisms and stuff like that. I highly recommend. And the music is really, really good as well. There's in particular one song that's basically, I think, like Wherever I Fall, I think is the name of the song. I was playing it like repeatedly after because it's just a very touching and beautiful moment in the film, and beautiful song as well. So yeah, I don't need to dive too deep into this, but Peter Dinklage is great. Haley Bennett, who I don't know from anything else, but she's really good as Roxanne. And Calvin Harrison Jr. is a wonderful Christian as well. And Ben Mendelsohn is the bad guy, and I like when Ben Mendelsohn shows up in anything as the bad guy, because I think he's a really good bad guy. He is like this era's like quintessential like 80s bad guy kind of actor, and so shout out to him being a delight and a surprise in the movie as well. So yeah, that's Cyrano. Cameron, what's your number 6?
Yeah, so my number 6 is going to be Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Is it really?
All right. Go ahead and you didn't see Sonic, right, Logan?
No, I've not seen Sonic 2. No,
right.
Go off, King.
Yeah, knock yourself out, Cameron.
I did not. I had a lot of hesitation going into this movie because I was not like, I'm like, yeah, it'll probably be good. Like Sonic the Hedgehog was really good. I really enjoyed it. Trevor and I watched it just before the pandemic hit. And so I was like, that was a movie that I was like, yeah, it was a really good experience. And then I saw Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and I was like, how did they get better? How is this better than the first one? And it is on just every level. The use of, I thought Tails was going to be so much more cringe than he was. And he just ended up being just this total delight of just like, I'm a fan of Sonic. And I was like, here are the fanboy jokes. And then it's just absolutely not that. It is a wonderful take on friendship and camaraderie and going through hard times together. And it opens up Sonic's like deeper lore around Sonic and this idea of like the Chaos Emerald, all this stuff, all this stuff that happens. And then we finally get to see Jim Carrey as the Dr. Robotnik, the Dr. Eggman that he was set up to kind of be like, to end up becoming in the first film. He becomes that. And he's so much like, I don't know how, but he's so much better than he was in the first one. Just because he's totally unhinged. I love that the sidekick to Dr. Robotnik had a secret base going on the entire time in a barista cafe in Green Hills. I love every aspect of what they had going on with it, to the point where I really enjoyed when Knuckles thinks Dr. Robotnik's about to betray him. Turns out, no. And then, like, the betrayal comes later, and it's, like, great. It's the way that it's done and paced is just so brilliantly well done. They take on the idea, it's like, because in the first movie, Sonic's super powerful. And the problem is that is, like, he's overconfident and all these other things. And then he finally meets a match in Knuckles, and Idris Elba as Knuckles is the most brilliant form of casting, I think, this year. He brings so much of a just like, I don't know if sardonic's the right word for it, but the way that he brings just kind of like this like neutrally aggressive kind of tone to things. I don't think sardonic's the right word, but the
I'd
idea
say stoic.
He's not just, yeah, stoic I guess is the right word to use for that. I didn't think it was, but I think you're right. The way that he is so, like, his stoicness is matched with a genuine interest in things.
He's basically Drax. He's Dave Bautista as Drax, but in a Sonic movie.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Although, like, different at the same time. I guess it's that same kind of, like, archetype of, like, serious man is funny and tells jokes without, like, and all that stuff. But yeah, I really appreciated just everything that everybody brought to that film. I appreciated that from the beginning to end, it is about, like, I'm like, I don't know how they're going to tie the Hawaii thing into this, the wedding thing. And then for the wedding thing to be like, oh, no, they made a mess of it. And then for the twist of that being actually it was a sting operation the entire time, like blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. I'm like, this is wild. This is so wild. And now they're pulling in the shadow lore from the later Hedgehog games from the Dreamcast era. And I'm like, what is that? Like, what is this? And it's just the best. It's the absolute best. It should fail on every level because it shouldn't work this well, but it does. And it's a massive juggling act. And I'm sure at some point the balls will drop to the floor. But when they do, I will be standing up and clapping because this movie was just such a brilliant joy. I watched this movie probably like 12 times. And most of those, of course, were with my nieces and nephew who love that, like, just absolutely love Sonic. And so, like, just getting to enjoy this thing that, like, was really good and, like, enjoying with people I love and care about. And yeah, it was just wonderful. Fantastic. I can't give it enough, high enough praise.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly enjoyed Sonic, and it does crack my top 10. We saw it together in theaters and stuff. It's very much like a wild, silly, dumb movie, but in a lot of the fun and like really good way. I mean, the fact that like my number 10 and number 9 are Sonic and Uncharted. It's like, hey, yay for like video game movies being actually on top 10 lists and not just terrible. And yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, very much one of those, like, this knows what kind of movie it is. Some of the things did not work for me at all. The fact that there's like a whole dance sequence that feels like ripped from 10 years ago or 7 years ago or something like that. That was dumb.
Loved it. Loved it.
Of course. But yes, Idris Elba as Knuckles is a lot of fun. The trio of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, fun whenever any of them are on screen. Jim Carrey continues to be great as Robotnik here, and yeah, just gets to go like full unhinged. And then yeah, the fact that like the second act of this movie is this weird rom-com in a Hawaii wedding that turns into this sting operation is just like a wild thing for a character that I did not even remember from the first movie at all. It's like, this is a weird detour, but it ties and it knows it's stupid and has fun with how stupid it is. And then yeah, I don't know Sonic stuff, but when they start throwing in like very obscure little beats and stuff, I'm like, all right, well, I kind of like, I know that name, I know the thing that it's alluding to, even if I never played those games. So they're keeping it like surface level. Whereas the first game or the first movie very much strayed away from like getting super into the weeds with Sonic stuff. Like they threw in like a picture of a, wonky Sonic drawing, and then like he liked chili dogs in the first one, and that was pretty much as far as they were willing to go with it. So this one, they fully leaned into what kind of movie this was and had a lot of fun with it. So yeah, shout out to Sonic being Cameron's number 6.
I will say also special shout out to when the sister-in-law who's supposed to be getting married goes on that rampage in the golf cart. Just beautiful.
Sure. Logan, how about your number 6?
Yes. As I was saying before we started recording, I had kind of broken down my films into like great, fantastic, like mid and bad territories. And with the number 6, we're officially into like great to fantastic movies. I think these are all great films. My number 6 is, I assume both of you will have it higher actually, is going to be The Batman.
Indeed, yes, I do have that higher
on my list as well. Yep.
All right, so we will discuss that. Yeah, Cyrano was in my tiering was the last of my great movies, which started I had Wakanda Forever, Turning Red, Cyrano in the great category, and now we get into my top tier, which is my excellent. And this one, I imagine, is probably higher on both your lists, but this is RRR, which I watched just yesterday.
It is higher
that we will talk about in a little bit. So Cam, hit us with your number 5 then.
Top Gun Maverick.
Top Gun Maverick.
Damn it. I know it is the number 1 movie on my haven't watched yet but need to watch list. I know for a fact it'll be my top 5 probably once I watch it. But Cameron, tell me why I should watch it.
I'm going to be honest. You missed out by not seeing it in theaters.
I know I did, right?
This is a movie that deserves to be seen in theaters. It was an experience. I've since watched it since it was not in theaters. It's still a great film. But if it was as good as it was seeing it in theaters, it would have been higher on my list. The rewatch brought it down a little bit just because the jet sequences are not as impactful when you're not watching it on a very large screen. I will say this film is a like legacy sequel film done completely right.
Yeah.
It is nailing everything that it's supposed to do. Tom Cruise is incredible in it. He is taking on the character of Maverick and who Maverick would be, 25, 30 years later in his life and career, was done excellently because he's way more mature, but he hasn't lost like a lot of the cockiness, like the bravado is gone, and all that's left now is like a refined confidence of an older pilot. Like, I was brash and young and cocky with a lot of bravado, but the bravado's been refined down to just like a firm confidence in his abilities. And it's not a movie about proving yourself in the way you normally think about it. It's a way of cementing yourself. Like, it's a way of like the question asked, like, what do you have left to give the Air Force? When you have given your entire life to it, when you lost your best friend to it. And the way they the way they approach the relationship between Goose's son and Maverick in this film is not what I was expecting it to be. And it shows that there is the funny thing is, this is kind of the third part of a trilogy that is not doing the film that connects the two. So there's a lot of stuff left unsaid for you to kind of imagine how things went down and imagine how things happened. And they give you enough inference and context to have an understanding of it. But there are definitely events, these people lived lives that we never saw on film. It's not like, oh, we pick up their story 20 years later and they're continuing their character development from 20 years ago, now 20 years later. It's not that. These people have lived lives. And so even though you get a repeat character in Maverick, he has significantly changed as he's gotten older. And it's an approach that a lot of long-term sequels don't do because they're afraid people won't recognize the character anymore. But somehow Tom Cruise makes it work here. It's done so well. The mission is it's hey, how do we approach the idea that there's a threat without having a very notable big bad in Russia anymore? Their approach to that is lame, but okay, do we want this film to cause a geopolitical issue, especially with with the war in Ukraine? Probably not. So keep it's a bit generic in that regard, but because it doesn't matter in the end who the bad guys are. It doesn't matter who the enemy is. It's about these pilots, and it's about this legacy and this idea of Top Gun being a school of the top fighter pilots and the legacy that those pilots then leave behind. And it's done so well, and it's so well acted. It's so good on just every level. I love it to death. It's a great movie, but this was a movie that deserved to have been seen on the screen, and I understand why. Before, it's yeah, okay, Tom Cruise probably got profits off of the box office of it. Undoubtedly, sure. But there is something about this movie that makes it worth watching in a theater. So if you ever get the opportunity to see it again in theaters, take it. 100% take it.
Oh yeah, I think this is definitely a movie that will continue to at your Alamos and stuff. It'll be a regular fare of they're gonna put it up on big screen. I mean, it's already it had already left theaters and then came back here at the end of the year. Because that was the fact that it was in the top 10 or top 5 movies for 16 weeks is largely unheard of, except when you go back to the original Top Gun back in the 80s. It had pretty much done that same kind of thing. The fact that it was just there all summer long, it lasted out all the other Marvel movies and stuff that came and went. It was definitely one of those, like, if I had any care of the Top Gun stuff, I would have gone ahead and like made an effort to go see it, but I just didn't care. And you know, I heard great things about it, but it was like, I don't really need to. I never felt the call to go see it, but I heard nothing but good things about it. So
To be fair, it is a military propaganda movie, 100%. It is advocating for the existence, continued existence of using human lives and putting them at risk for the purpose of war. But it's a kick-ass movie.
Hell yeah.
All right, Logan, what is your number 5?
I know Trevor can't. I'd be stunned if you have this higher. Cameron's already talked about the fact that he's going to have it higher. My number 5 and my first film in the top 5 is going to be Nope.
No, it is not on my list.
Yeah,
so.
I've been stunned.
Yeah.
You shouldn't watch it. In fact, I would encourage you not to watch this movie, Trevor.
Knowing you, Trevor, don't watch this movie.
Yeah,
I literally said it when I first watched it. I said you shouldn't watch it. I think that Nope is such a interesting, almost sounds so trite, like movie, right? Like I'm not someone who loves horror movies, right? Weirdly enough, The Last of Us was kind of one of the first things that kind of got me into that genre a bit more because of how I think tense and terrifying that game is at times. Very topical for today. But I think that Jordan Peele with Get Out kind of originally helped to sort of broaden what a horror film can be, right? I think Nope is really clever in that it largely eschews a nighttime setting and instead focuses on making the day scary. And it's sort of brilliant in that way. It features almost jarringly and shockingly one of the most disturbing, violent, and completely unnerving sequences I've ever seen in a film. And it is just completely not related to the rest of the story until you think about it. And it's absolutely captivating and something that I have no desire to ever watch again. But the rest of the film that kind of bookends that sequence in the middle of the film is phenomenal, right? I think Keke Palmer in particular, I can just heap buckets of praise on. She's phenomenal in this movie. And what it does in terms of sort of reinventing a Western, reinventing like horror films and the tropes associated with both, and then blending them together into this really fascinating fusion is phenomenal, right? It is unlike anything else I've seen. And I think at this point with his 3 movies now, I feel confident in saying that Jordan Peele is one of the most visually creative directors I've seen in a long time. The way he frames shots and moments and stories and the way characters are put in place, right? Like I can listen to him talk about Nope for forever, right? He is such an eye for, I think, kind of setting the table for what you're about to watch and then having it kind of unfold in front of you. And it's just brilliant. I think it is really a smart paced film. I don't know how many times I plan on watching it again. Maybe if I just skip over that one scene, I can watch it again. But it is fantastic, I think, throughout. And I think the cast is like perfectly paced. It is very funny as well. And that cannot be understated. And yeah, I think it is just a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic film. And just like when Resident Evil 7 Biohazard came out, and I did not expect a horror game to get anywhere close to my game of the year that year, and it ended up being like second or third. I didn't really expect Nope to be this high on my list, but it just blew me away, and I think it is just, yeah, an incredible film.
Nice. Cam, anything you want to add?
Yeah, it wasn't that high up on my list, actually. Just as we saw live or in the recording, it got bumped out. I was not as hot on it. One thing I will say about this film is it's extremely eclectic.
Yeah.
There is a level of nuance and a level of auteurship that I think is probably hardly rivaled, if and possibly unparalleled in the modern direction. Jordan Peele continues to amaze me with that. I think this is one of the best movies shot this year, as far as like how it's the cinematography of it. It is a strikingly gorgeous film, which makes that scene that you're referencing even far more terrifying. It is a film that, however, I think content-wise, like story beat wise, and like my interest in rewatching this movie is much lower. I tried rewatching it, but my interest was very low because of it. It's not to a level of like a Shyamalan film where once you know the twist, you kind of like can see it coming like 100 miles away. But the way that it takes and approaches its concepts is really brilliant. The symbolism on it is unmatched. I don't think anything does symbolism better in a film at all. I can't, like, he is so good at iconography and symbolism and utilizing one thing to tell 3 or 4 other things about this. And he works on, and it works so well on that level. Massive shout out and props to him for forcing the stunt people to make the Akira motorcycle scene happen. It is when that happens, it is a visual delight. Keke Palmer is incredible. The entire cast really is phenomenal. And direction wise, cinematography wise, it really doesn't miss. But as far as like story and plot, I think it's at second in his top 3 films.
I would agree with that.
I think it's the second. I think Get Out is still a better film as far as like the content and rewatchability of that movie. But
I agree with all this. It's fantastic stuff.
Yeah, but I think Nope, especially if you're talking about him being a black director in an industry like Hollywood, and like the actual thing that this movie is saying on that level of what it means to be in the film industry and being black, and like a lot of the symbolism around it is very, very brilliant and well done.
Yeah.
And a lot of times horror directors will be like, well, by this I meant, screw capitalism. And it's like, no, okay, bro, that's nice that you're saying it now, but it didn't really feel that. Like, it just feels like you're just like, no, he cut out the banker's heart, whatever. This is actually done so well in that regard of meeting that. But like a lot of my films are about like my enjoyment of rewatching them. And this is just not a film that I have any interest really in ever seeing again. But once again, I will say it's probably the most beautifully shot film of this year.
I do want to give a special shout out to, and this is not an original Logan thing, but I saw it and immediately loved it, which is, this is Jordan Peele. I mean, it is basically like an evil Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? And it is definitely like Jordan Peele doing Spielberg, and it's fantastic, right? As someone whose favorite director is Spielberg, it is gloriously influenced by that in so many great ways. And this is pretty obviously his first like blockbuster style film. And I think it is just a delight to watch in that arena too.
I had not heard that. Spielberg comparison, and it fits a million percent.
It immediately clicks the minute you hear it. It's like, oh yeah, absolutely, I see that, right? Yep.
It's a weird combination. What is the other film that was like about abductions? Was it
aside from Close Encounters?
Trevor? It's it's one from late 90s, early 2000s. It's about
Super 8. I mean, that's the only other, like, I remember that one being like, oh, it's like a Spielberg approach to E.T. and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, this is not a Spielberg type movie I'm referring to.
Contact then?
Is it Contact, the one where it's like the 2 guys who get like spaceship and then they're operated on and stuff like that, and they have like their eyes? I'm trying to remember what that film is, Fire.
Oh, Fire in the Sky.
Fire in the Sky, yeah. It's like if Fire in the Sky and Close Encounters like
had a baby, yeah.
Or if you did Close Encounters, but it had the theme and horror elements of Fire in the Sky.
Yeah. It's rad.
Yeah, it's super, like, that's actually a rad comparison to compare the two. It's still once again proves like he's redefining the horror genre again. Yeah. Jordan Peele's just an absolute brilliant director and cinematographer on top of that. Or I don't know if he did the cinematography for Nope, but it's quite fantastic.
Cool.
Trevor, number 4.
Moving on to our number 4s. I know this is probably somewhere on your list, Logan, still, but maybe it's here. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
It is indeed higher on my list.
All right, then we will hold off for a little bit longer. How about you, Cam? What's your number 4?
I will say that movie is on the top of my. I still haven't seen it. I need to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, yeah, it's great.
My number 4 is The Batman.
I still have it a little bit higher, so we will talk about The Batman in just a moment.
Sounds good.
How about you, Logan? What's your number 4?
My number, we might be in this, might be another skip round. My number 4 is going to be Glass Onion, A Knives Out Mystery.
Yep, I do indeed have that one higher as well. So we will move on to number 3, where now we can talk about The Batman, because that is my number 3 movie of the year. I thoroughly loved, like, I very much went into like, I don't need another Batman, but also I was never in the like Robert Pattinson as the Batman, boo, because I lived through Heath Ledger as the Joker. I
remember
and was like, I'm going to absolutely, especially like, I have the benefit of having never seen Robert Pattinson in the Twilight movies, and knowing all of the very creative and very interesting things he has done since very much led me to think, oh, I think that's a very interesting and compelling choice for the Batman. I will be very curious to see how this goes. And the fact that this was the most Batman as the detective from any other incarnation we've gotten, and it has a darkness to it, but it is a different darkness than the Nolan trilogy, and it finds a way to set itself apart from the Nolan trilogy. I don't know necessarily where I would rank it against the Nolan trilogy, but in this year, I very much loved, and was, even though it is a very, very long movie, I was very happy to go back and watch it again when it came to HBO Max and stuff. And the imagery that they pull into it, the symbolism, much like you guys were talking about with Nope, that they use, and the way they do so much to compare the Batman and the Riddler characters in this visually and thematically was a very interesting and compelling story. And it ultimately also led to me going back and like revisiting the Arkham games this year.
Yeah, same.
I replayed Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, and was just like, yeah, this is a fun version of Batman that I really had a great time with. I mean, it's an all-star ensemble cast. Selena Kyle, who
Zoe
Kravitz.
The
Actress Zoe Kravitz is like phenomenally stunning and wonderful in there. Colin Farrell as the Penguin is a blast. Paul Dano as the Riddler. We don't get enough of him for what I would like, but like the bits that we do get of him are intimidating and scary.
My entire talk about it. Yeah, it's great. He's great.
And yeah, so the Batman is my number 3. Had a great time with it. I know you guys had it a little bit lower on your lists, but yeah, let's talk the Batman.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I had it 6, so I mean, it seems lower in comparison, but I think, like I said, it is in the category of the 6 films that I think are just great, fantastic movies. I think the Batman's phenomenal, right? It also motivated me to go play Arkham Asylum. I was literally playing it today. Like 7 months later, just being like, you know what, I should just get the rest of the Riddler trophies in that game. And so, yeah, I mean, it's great, right? I think, I feel like so many conversations around Batman inevitably lead back to the Dark Knight trilogy for somewhat understandable reasons, because of how profound of an impact that had on not even just superhero stories, but just cinema in general, the kind of impact that had. And it sort of does a disservice to the Batman a little bit, because, okay, sure, maybe it's not as good as The Dark Knight, but like, there are a lot of movies that aren't. In fact, most movies aren't as good as The Dark Knight, right? That's a very high bar to clear. But I think that it is easily the best Batman we've gotten since then, I would argue. I like it more than Dark Knight Rises and anything with Ben Affleck. And if it's only like my 4th favorite Batman movie maybe ever, it's because there are a lot of good Batman movies. He's a really good character. It's a very high bar. It's a compliment, right? And so I think it's great, right? Like, the length was never an issue for me at any point in time, and it still remains not an issue. And I think one of the best compliments I can give to it is that in one single movie, it made Gotham feel alive in a way that a movie location in a superhero story hasn't felt since the Dark Knight trilogy, right? Like none of the MCU movies make me feel the locations like this. None of the DC movies for sure make me feel the location like this. And so like it just makes Gotham a living, breathing organism, its own character in a way that I haven't seen in a superhero story since the Dark Knight trilogy, right? It is so good and so compelling. And it is, I love the way you described it, Trevor. It is dark, but in a way that's so different than the Dark Knight trilogy, while also being the faint outline of like this optimistic, hope-filled movie too, right? And I don't know where they possibly go from the ending of this movie. In some ways, I'm so curious to find out what they do with that, because that is in some ways like kind of, I mean, it is literally the closing point of the Dark Knight trilogy is where this movie ends. But I find it so compelling and such an interesting, brave choice to kind of end the first chapter of this story here. Paul Dano's Riddler is phenomenal, right? I mean, he is just fantastic, right? Probably, I mean, certainly in the run for my favorite Batman villain performance that's not a Joker character, right? Like him and like Danny DeVito as a Penguin are right up there as like the non-Joker Batman, right? Like they're and very different, but each fantastic, I think, and each unnerving and creepy in their own way. And he is unsettling in a way that I, you know, with the many versions of Batman stories I've played, read, and watched over the years, have never really seen before. And I found that so interesting. And so engaging and so enthralling. And yeah, it's very David Finchery. It's very 70, and all the good ways, and minus none of the Kevin Spaciness of it. And yeah, it's great. And Zoe Kravitz is phenomenal. And really the last thing I would say on the movie is Robert Pattinson is a super weirdo guy. And he is such an obvious choice to play Bruce Wayne. Like when that was like such one where like when I heard the cast, I was like, oh yeah, he's a weirdo. Like that makes such sense. Like, and he makes Bruce Wayne be a weird little guy in a way that we don't really ever see of Bruce Wayne, because like that's not the image that we have in the animated series or of Adam West or of Michael Keaton, right? Who kind of set the templates, but like would definitely make sense of like, oh yeah, like Bruce Wayne might be Michael Keaton and charming and fun, and engaged and witty, or he's going to be a weird little guy just hanging out in the shadows and not talking to anyone. It's going to be one or the other. It's the flip of the coin, right? And yeah, like I love this version of Bruce. And I love the direction they go with it. And I love his arc so much. And yeah, it is a great like Batman year 2 story, right? It deliberately didn't make it a year 1, but it's basically year 1. And it's great. It's a fantastic film, and it is not a slight against the movie at all that it's not any high on my list. It's just a very good year for films, but it is a great movie. Yeah. Great soundtrack as well. I don't want to miss a beat on that. The soundtrack is so good.
Indeed. Kim, any thoughts you want to add?
Sure. Trevor, you and I talked about it when it came out. We did a spoiler cast about it. We talked for, I think, like 2.5 hours about the movie. So I don't like, if you want to hear more of my detailed thoughts, go back and watch that.
We've talked about this movie a lot on this channel as well.
This movie, it's such a great take on Bruce Wayne to have him already in the darkness. Mm-hmm. And it's not like a Bruce Wayne who ever made a concerted effort to pretend to be a playboy. He has always been, understandably so, and well understood by the citizens of Gotham. Like, yeah, his parents were murdered in front of him. He's fucked up. Like, he's not going to be okay. He's not okay. And the way, but also they can't believe that that a guy who goes out every night and beats up criminals is somehow like the sheltered kid that nobody ever sees anymore. It's a take on Batman of having him already in the darkness. This isn't about his descent into dealing with somebody like the Joker or dealing with somebody like this. It's somebody who's already in that darkness. He starts the movie saying, I've been doing this for however long, and I can't find hope. Like, where is the end of this? Like, where does this And because I'm in the muck, I'm in the grime of the darkness of the city, and I don't know how to heal it. I don't know how to make it better. And this is a story about Batman finding that path, finding that beacon, becoming that hope. And he does it in a way that I think is very, like, I love it. I love the way this film ends. I love the way that it, like, it's his realization of what he actually needs to be. He thought he knew what he needed to be, but he realizes that was only satisfying his own thing. That was only satisfying his ego and his drive and like what was hurting him. And when he starts thinking about healing, like actually healing, that's when the movie comes to its climax. That's when you have like just, it's so brilliant. Paul Dano as Riddler is just, when they announced that casting, I was like, that's the best Riddler casting you could. I've been a fan of his since Little Miss Sunshine. I was so ready for this, and it was done so well. I will speak to also like Gotham being a character. I probably went on for this for like a solid half hour when Trevor and I spoiler casted. This is the best Gotham's ever been. When he's driving through Gotham, and it's not just like highways and freeways or some generic streets. It's someone went through and mapped out a real Gotham, like a realistic looking Gotham. The Times Square, London Square kind of like area that has the roundabout in it that it goes through, that we see get flooded, that we like all of that. I love the nightclub that actually has the secret like home underneath because so-and-so can't leave. And it's so unbelievably brilliant in its design. And it's the way it's shot. The way that a lot of things about Nolan's trilogy I don't think have aged as well is the contrast between light and dark is really strong. And sometimes that movie gets really dark. And literally. And this movie somehow finds a way of utilizing that in a way that I think is better. I think that when we talk about this film being dark, it's not dark in its like its themes and its elements, but it still has like the kind of like lighter reflective lighting. This movie soaks in the darkness that's around in a very real way. Where I would call Batman in the Nolan trilogy like a dark metal gray, or like almost like silver blackish, where there is still some reflection going off of it in regards to like the way that it's shot, the costume, the outfit, and everything. There's something about this one that it absorbs the darkness in, and I think that the direction of it is brilliant. I think everything about this film is really, really brilliant. I fight with myself to figure out if I like this more than I like The Dark Knight. I love this take on Batman so much. And so the Batman, like it's up there for me for that reason. The only reason it's not number one is because the next three films
real good
are incredible. It's such a great time.
All right.
I did just want to add, because Cameron brought it up and I thought it was a great point. Like two things, which is just like the little like voiceover narration he gives at the beginning of the film is like one of the best like 30-second blurbs of like Batman's usage of fear as a tool that I think we've ever gotten. It's so good. And then the like complete juxtaposition of that is that like what they do at the end of the film in terms of making Gotham be a place that isn't stuck in suspended animation, right? Because one of the things people might be able to wield against Batman's stories, just by the nature of comics in general, right, is that like Batman and Gotham are sort of stuck in this like constant cycle, right? Where like Gotham can't really progress because then there's no point for Batman to be around, right? And like the Nolan trilogy addressed this very directly by having that sort of be the point, and that we're like once Gotham is, once he gets healed, he can leave Gotham, Gotham can get better. It's like that kind of thing, right? They can unshackle each other from it in the last movie, right? Again, that's how that movie ends. And so for here to give it hope, right, to have like, at least right now, right, like the mayor not be someone who's corrupt, someone who is like this visionary, someone who does want to actually achieve good in the city is really interesting. Like what they do with like the police force is really interesting. What they do with Batman's arc itself is really interesting, right? Like I think giving us an idea of like, oh, maybe Gotham can actually improve out of the muck is like a really interesting idea. And again, I'd be really curious to see how they go about growing that, right? Because I think we got flickers of that throughout the Dark Knight trilogy. And that's part of what makes that trilogy so special. And so I hope that continues the next movies, if we get them, of this as well. Trevor.
Cool.
Real quick, I do want to say shout out though to the film for not intentionally doing it, but giving me like really bad like January 6th flashbacks at the end of that movie.
Sure.
Cam, hit us with your number 3.
Oh, my number 3 is Glass Onion. I believe it's higher on other people's lists. So.
I still have it higher on my list.
Yes, ooh, indeed. Trevor, you dog. All right.
So hit us with your number 3 then, Logan.
It apparently is going to be higher on someone else's list. I have got for my number 3, RRR.
It's higher on my list.
Mm-hmm. All right. Then we move on to number 2s. This is where I have Glass Onion, a Knives Out Mystery. So we can discuss it here.
We have the same number 1, Trevor.
I'm not surprised by that. And so, yeah. And I know that's definitely going to be on someone's or somewhere on Cameron's list. So I'm going to be curious what your number 2 is then. Or am I? I could probably figure it out. Oh, yeah, I can figure it out. Yes, Glass Onion. We talked about it not too long ago. You, Logan, me, and Jazz talked about it. So this will be our chance to discuss it now with Cameron in the mix, who could not make that episode. The original Knives Out was a blast and a joy, and like such a breath of fresh air in the murder mystery genre of things. Glass Onion is that again with a completely different cast, and I think definitely a more lighthearted and like light setting in general. Obviously, going from like the New England manor to Greece, an island in Greece. It hit at like a perfect time for social commentaries on Elon Musk and stuff like that. That was a delight, and it's just such a like. I very much, as I walked out of that movie and as we talked about on our kind of spoiler cast about it, if Rian Johnson and Daniel Craig want to make one of these every few years, I will continue to show up for it absolutely. Every few years. Throw in a big old fun cast of wonderful character actors to just be fun characters and go do this, like tell this fun story together. Like it's never so much about the mystery so much as it is about like the way the mystery is set up is fun, and especially like on a rewatch it's engaging to see how all of the pieces were set up and kind of placed. But it's so much more just like it's fun seeing these performers and the characters that they're portraying and how those characters interact and whatnot that make these so much fun and rewatchable compared to the story that is, I know how it ends, so I'm to kind of what you said earlier, Cameron, like the story of like it's not as rewatchable once you know the twist or something like that. Even knowing the twist still makes it fun because it's just still a delight and a joy to watch. And Daniel Craig getting to play this character, especially after we've seen him in many interviews how sometimes he would feel constrained in having the Bond role for as long as he did. Obviously, to tie it into the Bond rewatch show that we did this year, getting to see him play this like lighthearted, jovial, fun character is such a joy and is a testament to like the fact that he gets to go from Bond to now just creating like his own legacy character, because much like Poirot and stuff like that, it could very easily outlive his time as Benoit Blanc. Other characters, other performers could easily step into that kind of role if they end up going their route. It's just a ton of fun and such a joyous film. I was so very glad I got to see that in theaters, as we touched on in our spoiler cast, as opposed to just waiting for it to come to Netflix. And I think it's very much one that next time around I will try and see a second time in theaters when the third Knives Out mystery hits, so that you can have the joy of seeing it with other people and getting to see
Right.
their reactions and stuff like that, which is something that I think we lose when it's only in theaters for a week and then it's we're watching it on Netflix. But yes, Glass Onion, my number 2 movie of the year.
It's great, right? I mean, again, me and Trevor already talked about it a little bit, but I think it's fantastic, right? I mean, I think, like I said in this podcast, I think I might, by like a hair's breadth, prefer the first one to the second one. But I will say that I like this one quicker, right? Because it took that second rewatch for me to really fall in love with the original Glass, or the original Knives Out. Whereas this one just like worked on the first go. I think it's beautiful. And I love just hearing Rian Johnson and Daniel Craig do like scene by scene breakdowns of stuff and the character breakdowns. And I've had a lot of fun doing that. And it came out at a great time where, again, it came out or I watched it, I should say, during like the Christmas break while I was in the midst of rewatching like 6-7 Bond films anyway. And so it's like, oh, this is a great little like switch the flip here. I just like Daniel Craig having fun, right? I think, aside, and Trevor can probably vouch for this as someone who also just watched all these movies. Aside from Casino Royale, he never really had fun being James Bond, right? I mean, that was one where he had a blast in Casino Royale, that character of Bond, and then he was very somber the rest of the 4 movies. And so like it's great to just see him smile and have fun. It's great to see him do weird things like this or like Logan Lucky. And I will take as many of these stories as we can get. I love Benoit Blanc as a character. I love Daniel Craig's performance, and he's, I think, much more centrally tied into this one than the first one, which is a lot of fun, and is kind of partially more the viewer's eyes, like I said. I think the location is great. I think the cast is great. And yeah, I think Knives Out, A Glass Onion is, or flip that, Glass Onion, Knives Out story is fantastic. It's a great movie.
Cool. Cameron, anything you want to throw in there?
Yes. As somebody who didn't get a chance to talk about it, except I talked about it with Trevor, like the day I moved in. That was most of our conversation. When we had lunch. I fucking love this movie. I'm a massive mystery, like, whether it's books, movies, whatever. I love mysteries. I love the whodunits. I love but I have a particular special love for things like Agatha Christie, who deliberately goes out of her way to make it a story about characters going through the mystery than the mystery itself. Like Trevor said about like how the twist is, or like where the turn of this movie is. That's not as important as what the characters are doing throughout it, and it's what makes the rewatchability of this film so high. I watched it twice in a week. I watched it once, and then 2 days later, I said I just need to watch it. Not for like trying to catch things I didn't catch before, but I just want to watch this movie. This is easily my most rewatched film. If you want to talk about it that way, this way, except for a few.
Except for Sonic, which you already said in this podcast.
Yeah, Sonic. I said that. I stated that, and then I realized, well, I haven't watched Sonic the Hedgehog in like 3 months. Like that's the difference. And Knives Out came out like literally around Christmas, so it would have been if it had come out earlier, I'm sure. Because I've already got the itch to kind of put it on again. This film is just so fantastic. The casting is brilliant beyond means. Brilliant, but yeah, whatever. It's brilliant. It's just absolutely brilliant. Dave Bautista showing that he is the best actor to come out of WWE. Deal with it, Rock. I'm sorry. He just is. He just is. His range is incredible. His approach to a character that is so incredibly toxic and terrible, but at the same way, when he does like the big dick, like confrontation with Andy, or who he thinks is Andy, and it's just like, goes into it. There's it's like, oh, okay, well, at least he's not a coward about like approaching her with this. And there is something to him. At the same time, though, he got banned for hawking rhino boner pills to kids. So like, still fuck him. He just like, okay, he died. Okay. Like, But the idea, like, Whiskey is such a brilliant character.
Yes.
Whiskey is amazing. I love Whiskey. She is so fantastic because she's set up to be like dumb arm candy, and she proves to be anything but.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, and also her with the spear gun, hilarious. There's so much about this movie on so many levels, but I really have to say the timing of it is impeccable. The timing with it lining up with the implosion going on over at Twitter with Elon Musk being proved that he's actually just an enormous dumbass with a big wallet.
Mm-hmm.
And it coming full circle with Edward Norton just doing a brilliant job in this movie. Massive shout out, of course, to Joseph Gordon-Levitt's cameo in this movie. He's the dong of the clock.
Yes, the hourly dong.
The hourly dong. But also, like, just it's so brilliant. The way I've broke down scenes with Trevor already, like when we had that lunch and I was talking about it. So I won't go too into it here because I'm sure I'll be exhausting things that I also love that was already talked about in the previous spoiler cast. But this is a brilliant film, and Netflix, it's such a coup after Netflix has kind of like been super mediocre with their acquisitions, to downright terrible on some of them, that this was like such a get for them. But also, thank you.
I do have to say, it is incredibly. You cannot watch the original Knives Out anywhere. It is not available on any streaming platform right now, and that is the craziest thing to me. I don't know what's going on with that. Why Netflix doesn't have it yet, but it's absolutely baffling.
Well, Netflix doesn't own
anywhere.
Netflix doesn't own the distribution rights to the first.
I don't think they would have included that in the deal when they spent like $400 million for these two. It's just like, also give us this one. The fact I can't watch it anywhere is crazy.
Yeah, it's a Lionsgate distribution property, and Lionsgate movies, unless you're willing to fork over the money just to buy them, are really hard to get.
Crazy.
Well, there's our Glass Onion Knives Out ranking. Cameron, what is your number 2?
I guarantee you guys have it higher. It's Everything Everywhere All at Once.
It is indeed.
Ooh, Cameron's number 1. I know. Yeah, good for you, boy. Good for you.
I had my suspicions, so my suspicions were proven true. So I'm pretty sure I have.
We will definitely each talk this. Yeah,
Logan, your number 2, I'm presuming, is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
The number 2 movie for the year for me is indeed The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I think, to be fair, my top 3 are all pretty close together. But yeah, it's Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which I know neither one of you have higher.
Yep.
And Cameron doesn't see it. It's really just me and Trevor conversation. We've already talked about this, I think, on a podcast as well. But Unbearable Weight is great. We don't need to spend too much time on it, but it's just a ton of fun, right? Like it is a movie that has no reason being this good and being this smart and being this clever, right? It sort of knows what this like trope of film is and somehow still manages to subvert your expectations around it and do new and creative and fun things with it. So I really like Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I think that the cast of characters around Nick Cage is a ton of fun. It's super sweet. It's super wickedly funny. It's surprisingly good as an action film. But you know, before and beyond anything else, this is a movie about Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal's bromance, and it is magical. It is wonderful. I'm deeply, deeply in love with it. If I know any one thing about Cameron Abbott, it is that he would love this movie, and he would love that bromance. And so I definitely encourage you to check it out. I had a blast with it. Yeah, it is my runner-up for my movie of the year. And yeah, I mean, I just think it's a great movie. I think how authentic and real and genuinely touching that friendship is, right? There aren't enough on-screen depictions of male friends in a caring and loving way. And these two guys who've known each other for days manages to convey it better than almost all other movies where they're friends for years and years and years. And so, yeah, I absolutely give that a shout out.
Yeah, it is such a delightful deconstruction of Nicolas Cage's kind of like whole deal, and the fact that like it is a movie that would not work with like there are maybe one or two other actors that you could like kind of make this movie with, but it I don't think it would work as well with anybody else. Like the only like one of the few other ones I could even think of would be like John Travolta or something like that, and he's
Sure.
such a different person these days compared to Nicolas Cage that still does do the Nicolas Cage thing so frequently. And yeah, it's such a fun like take on him as a person and as a performer. And I love that like we get kind of this glimpse at like almost a truth to Nicolas Cage. And obviously it is a highly fictionalized version of Nicolas Cage, but this idea of like the reason he takes so many, weird jobs is because he just loves working or something like that I think there is a grain
Feels
of
utterly
truth
genuine. Right, yeah.
to that he will find something to love about any kind of role that he gets to take on. So much fun. And yeah, Pedro Pascal is a delight in here, and it is such a great two-hander with the two of them. Throw in the action, throw in that there is just a wild like drug trip scene that they go on together that is a delight. So much fun, and like the movie kind of like has a couple things where I'm like, I didn't really need it to go that way, with some like side story stuff, but it's still so much fun, and yeah, like it's definitely one that I want to go back and like revisit and just have like a fun time with.
Definitely.
Yeah. Shout out to The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Movie of the year time.
Diving into our number ones. I know Logan and I have the same one, and I know what Cameron's is. So since I think both Logan and I have the same number one, I think we'll throw it to you first, Cameron, to talk and lead the discussion on RRR.
You're damn right. Holy shit, this movie. This movie has like I have friends who are into like Bollywood movies and whatnot, and they were singing
technically just as a point of
Hollywood, right?
This is Hollywood.
It's a Hollywood movie.
I get that. I get there's a difference. I understand now that I watched a Hindi dub of this movie.
That's the wrong way to watch it. You gotta watch it in Telugu, man.
Yeah, well, tell that to Netflix.
Oh my god, I know, right?
Yeah, it's super weird because I was like, I'm gonna watch it in the original, and then I found out later that was the dub, but it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a brilliant movie. It is so goddamn great. I fucking love it. It is the most Cameron-ass movie you could possibly make. God, from the beginning to the end, I love it so goddamn much. The combination of things like, this like bromance between these two guys and how it turns out like one's chasing the other without realizing it. And it's just like the play off of everything. But how like, God, like this movie has everything. It is, I would call it like this is going to be a bit outlandish and people are probably going to roast me for it, but I very much consider it like in a completely different way, that the only reason I'm making parallels is because it has everything in it, is Princess Bride. Princess Bride is a film that has everything in it. Romance, action, drama, like all the stuff. And then on the flip side of it, you have RRR that has romance, action, like incredible storytelling, mythos, one-on-one challenges,
dance battle, musical numbers.
It's so good. It's so good on so many levels. Natu Natu is such a fucking delight because I thought that was going to be such a cringy scene, and it goes from like my like concern and expectations of the scene to just being like this fucking brilliant number, and it's just so goddamn great on so many levels. Like holy shit, I fucking love this movie. It's so good. The action in it is impeccable. The direction, cinematography, everything about it is just top of the line, top form. I cannot believe they made the scene as long as it was where the guy goes to arrest the other guy who threw the thing. And he's just like, that entire scene is just the most, like, it's like, oh, okay, cool. British people are the bad guys. I get that. Cool. Let's go. Yeah. Anti-colonialism. I'm definitely on that kick right now.
Movie. Don't you worry, guys.
Yeah, yep. I'm definitely on a kick for that. That's the intro. Then they show this, and I'm like, oh, is this guy, like, what's this guy's deal? And then he does that. It's like, I'm conflicted. Because this guy's a cop. And if there's one rule about that nerdy site, anything, it's that we're a cab. And
you heard it here first.
Not the first time people would have heard it. That being said, when it comes to it, it's like, I don't know how to feel about this guy, because like he just did like the most baller ass thing I've seen in such a long time.
Yeah.
Of just, I'm gonna arrest that guy. He leaves and goes
that's
to arrest
it.
the guy, and what he does to go through it, every aspect of that entire like quote unquote chase is brilliant, and I love it. And I love how it ties in directly afterwards to it being like, ma'am, I can vouch for this man. It's like, god damn, you can vouch for him. Holy shit. Like,
I want to jump in on that because so obviously I'm the latest to the party on this one after you guys have been gushing about this for most of the year. So me just watching it yesterday, literally, I'm talking with Cameron a little bit about it. I knew images certainly from the movie, and I knew like beats and stuff like that, and I knew that it was like very much this like two-hander of like this bromance, these two guys, and like you're rooting for both of them, and like that whole like opening sequence of like him being like a person seemingly against his own people and stuff like that. I was like, why am I supposed to root for this guy? I don't like this guy. Like, he's a badass, sure, and he's very charming and all that stuff, and like I end up rooting for his friendship and stuff, but I don't want this guy to win. And then like just the sheer length of this movie, we get an hour and a half in and we get introduced to his whole backstory and stuff like that. Like, oh, okay, now I like it. The movie has made me like and care about this guy, and now I'm comfortable rooting for him and all that stuff. Like the only reason it is ultimately higher on my list is because it is it is like 2 to 3 movies all in one, and I was exhausted by the end of watching it all, and I think like so some of that pacing doesn't work for me, and I think a lot of that is from not having a connection or lineage with Tollywood, Bollywood kind of action and stuff like that, and understanding that this is just sometimes how they tell these stories. But it was such a like, I'm very glad that I ended up throwing this in as a last minute watch to the fact that it did shoot so far up in my list as it does. And shout out to freaking Elsa from Raiders of the Lost The Last Crusade being like the evil bad woman. That being like like she looks familiar, why do I know this woman? And then like looking that up and being like, oh, holy hell. So much fun, such a joy. I will toss it back to you and to Cameron and Logan to continue to gush about this.
I just think that all I'll say is that it is a moment, I think, for Indian cinema that Parasite was for Korean cinema a couple years ago, in terms of just sort of breaking through the paradigm, right? I think it's quintessentially classically Indian cinema in a modern, innovative new way. I mean, each of the acts of the film is basically a whole different genre, right? It is like there's like a period piece in here. There's like a lighthearted romance film in here. There's like a really brutal scene of like one of the bros whipping the other bro. And then the entire last act of the movie is just Rambo 3. Like it is Rambo 3 to a degree that I could not have ever possibly imagined. It's fun. I was really lucky and fortunate to have gotten to watch this in a movie theater that was a predominantly Indian American movie theater, and it was an absolute blast. It was a joy. It was a ton of fun, and I think, it is my second favorite Indian language film I've seen. I think it is an easy one to recommend to people who want to get into the kind of Indian cinema scene and landscape. It's great. It's a ton of fun. And the last piece I would give to it is, again, just like I said with The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, there are not enough authentic portrayals of male friendship in cinemas. And we get another really great, really genuine, heartfelt, like emotional friendship here between two men. And I feel really lucky that we're getting this. I wish we'd had more of these films when we were growing up as a collective trio. And we are all really lucky and fortunate to just be part of a group of friends that are very, I think, genuine and are very loving and are very kind of emotionally raw with one another. But that certainly was not the community that I grew up in as a kid growing up in Missouri. And so, yeah, I love that we're getting more and more of those on-screen portrayals in film. And what a great film. Shout out to crashing a cart full of tigers and other animals into a party and all the mania that ensues. It's great. What a great time RRR is.
I will also just add that I actually didn't see this movie earlier in the year. I watched it the day after I watched Glass Onion. I had when I was like the in between of when I moved out of like my sister's place to moving with Trevor, I had a lot of free time, and I used it to watch movies and stuff. And so I caught up with a couple films, and one of those happened to be RRR, and it's a film that I think really does such an amazing job of bringing to life something that is completely foreign.
Mm-hmm.
Not hating the British. That's natural. I'm an American.
We love hating the British.
We love hating the British until we want to.
There's nothing more American than that, right?
Yep.
From our birth, that's the one thing we do right.
Unless we want to love the Victorian era, then we really, and the Regency era, then we really love it. England and Britain, but actually hating England's the most like American thing you can do. When it comes to this, it does just such an amazing job of just like, we are not going to be like this is not going to be a highly complicated movie. We're not going to be like, oh, is there moral gray? It's like, no, these are the good guys. These are the bad guys. Bing bang, bing bang, boom. Not so brief because, like Trevor said, it's a 3-hour movie. And there's several bing bang booms. But I just have to say, like, I have not seen a movie that I've enjoyed this much in years. And it's easily going to, at some point I have to sit down and figure out, like, what are my top 10 movies of all time? And that, like, RRR is just going to be beating down candidates that I thought would make that list. So enjoy it. It's my film of the
year. Yeah. Very, very wonderful film. And yeah, shout out to, I love the comparison to like Parasite, like this being a movie that did seemingly break through kind of into the wider consciousness this year. So the fact that the song won the Golden Globe for best song, pissing off a lot of Taylor Swift fans and stuff like that.
Listen, it's been in my head repeatedly every day since I watched the film. It's so good. Yeah. It's so good.
Then yeah, we'll wrap up here with our mine and Logan's number 1, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Cameron's number 2. Such a stellar, like, visual treat of a movie, such a creative storytelling kind of thing. Much like RRR is a great representational kind of piece. This also being like such a representational piece that Ke Huy Quan has come out a couple times and been like, there weren't movies for him, and that's why he's disappeared off the map since the era of the 1-2 punch of Temple of Doom and Goonies and stuff. And for him to get to come back in such a big way and just crush it as Raymond in this is a delight. Seeing this in tandem, as we talked about with Michelle Yeoh, and like right at the same time that we were hitting Tomorrow Never Dies in our Bond watch along, and getting to like remember that she's in that and is one of the best bomb femme fatales of the James Bond series. Like such a great year for both of them, and it's just like endlessly creative in its multiverse, and it does kind of follow through on the promise of the premise in a way that Multiverse of Madness did not, such that we get obviously hot dog fingers hands, and we get raccoon cooey, and just like every universe they go into is either like a self-contained payoff or pays off so much somewhere down the line of that movie. And it's a movie I've continued to think about throughout the year in a way of like, if I'm having a bad day, I'll find myself thinking, well, maybe in some alternate universe, Trevor's having a better day, or something like that. And that's, I think, such a testament to like, especially the way that the story is framed of like, we have the daughter character that feels so bleak and cynical, and what's the point of it for so much of the movie, and the fact that the movie then kind of spins on that and says like, no, there is a point, there is a joy to this, even if all of these universes are pointless or something like that. There's still joy and love and happiness to be found here. And I had such a great time watching it the original time, and then like watching it on a rewatch and seeing just little moments, seeing especially like the ensemble of characters and seeing like where they pop up in other versions of the universe or something like that, and how they come back into the fold in kind of the main universe that we get throughout the film. So much fun, such a joy, and I had such a great time with this, and it is easily the standout of the year for me in terms of like just creative and fun visual storytelling, and also has beautiful, brilliant writing as well. Logan.
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything Trevor said, right? I think that Everything Everywhere All at Once is one of the most profound, I think, and thoughtful movies I've ever seen. I think it is a real gift to be able to have a film that makes a deep impact on you, but it is sort of another level of gift to see that impact be made on people close to you, right? And see the way like that film impacts them, and see the way that it like sort of changes how they view things and how they feel about their own relationships with their parents or their mothers or that kind of thing. And I've been really fortunate to kind of see that with Everything Everywhere All at Once with multiple people in my life. I think that Trevor sort of alluded to it. The character of Raymond is my favorite character in films this year. He's probably going to be one of my favorite characters in films ever, right? I think it is a role that in another movie could be just sort of a thankless, like you're just the meek kind of whatever husband, and now you're like like if this came out in the 90s, he'd be Arnold Schwarzenegger, just like acting meek with like sunglasses on, and then like now he's the fucking action star bursting out of a thing, right? He's kindergarten cop, and they didn't go that way, and they added such depth and pathos to him. They added such, I think, a level of care, and the fact that he is in so many ways the beating emotional heart of this film, and has such a well of love within him for the people in his life. I found absolutely beautiful, right? And even in these other universes, that is sort of one of the main through lines that carries over, right? Is that love, even if these two people aren't together, it's still there. And I think the fact that the movie ends in the way it does, not with a giant, crazy, epic final battle, of which we've gotten many in this film, but instead with just accepting people for who they are, right? And that being such a powerful, like, surprising, cathartic way to kind of have a conclusion to a story be based around. I think it's just like a genius idea. And I deeply, deeply loved it. I think there's so much to admire about the film. I think there's so much to admire about the performances of all of the cast. Michelle in particular, you're again in a little bit of a connection to the unbearable weight of massive talent, and Nicolas Cage there sort of have a showcase to say like, I am a phenomenal actor or actress, and if you've forgotten about that, that's on you, right? Like I still have this quality within me, and can sort of subvert expectations of what I can do and who I am, and have that pay off in really wonderful ways. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I agree with everything Trevor said. I think he put it beautifully, and I just think it is a beautiful, beautiful film that, in 2030, in 2030, whenever we do a like, top 10 films of the past decade list, this would be almost certainly in my top 10 list of the decade, and maybe even my top 5. I think it is just a phenomenal, phenomenal, beautiful film.
Yeah. Anything to throw in there, Cam?
Sure.
Trevor started doing some math also.
Yeah.
Oh, I've already got the top 10
Perfect.
calculated. Yep.
This movie I haven't talked a lot about this movie online or on podcasts outside of like when I talked to Trevor about it. this movie, and it's not something I don't think I've even mentioned to Trevor, is because it's a bit awkward, because it gets deeply personal on such a weird, intricate level. I extremely identify with Joy. And this movie, in a way, deals with, like, has some content in it that I didn't think I would never expect to be, like, triggering for me, but it very much is, because despite how much I loved her, my foster mother, who was an ethnically Chinese immigrant, never really approved, or never really got, like, me being queer, and was never, like, really wholly on board of it, or on board with it. Uh, it was not a point of contention. It was a point of, like, she just would ignore it. So, like, Joy's struggle with sexuality, it feels weird, because it's like I see myself in that, but at the same time, like, I don't feel comfortable on, like, other levels with it either, because her experience is very much like the Asian American experience, and, like, my experience that kind of, like, has a Venn diagram connection to that experience feels sometimes like a misappropriation. So this film gets a bit complicated with. That being said, it's a brilliant. It's so well done. It's the best example of a multiverse I think I've ever seen in anything. The way that it handles it has, like, the single best line in cinema this year, and maybe in many other years, which is, like, in another world, another life, I would have really loved folding laundry with. Absolutely breaks my heart every time I've rewatched that scene several times. Breaks my heart every time, because it's so fucking well delivered. Ki Hui Kwan is, like, what a brilliant return to form. What a, like, or even better than a return to form. He came back in such a stellar way. And is I'm a dorky, lovable dad and husband, and also I'm a cool, like, action star. Also, I'm the suavest motherfucker in cinema this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Holy shit, he's so great. So, like, the reason why this movie is not higher up on my list is because, like, rewatchability. This is not a very rewatchable film for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because of,
It
like,
was your number 2. It's fine that RRR beats it.
Yeah, it's fine.
RRR is a great movie too.
It is. That being said, like, I think overall you guys have just absolutely nailed it with your commentary of what you love about this movie. It's what I love about it too. And also just shout out to Hot Dog. Like, just such a dumb idea and premise, and executed flawlessly.
And shout out to Jamie Lee Curtis in general as a supporting. Like,
the
cast of this movie is just such a stellar standout, and I love that. Like, I always have a concern when, like, a movie hits really early in the year that it's not going to be remembered and honored appropriately during kind of award season. So I love that that both Michelle Yeoh and Ke Huy Quan got Golden Globe love. Hopefully
His speech, phenomenal.
Hopefully they get continued love with, like, the Oscars and stuff like that. And yeah, such a joy. So diving into go ahead, Logan.
I just wanted to say, like, I obviously echo Cameron's thoughts on that as well, but I did just want to say that the ultimately Everything Everywhere All at Once is a really minimalist cast. Like, there's ultimately, like, 5 characters that matter. And I think what they're able to do with that relatively small, tiny cast, and convey such grand emotions and thoughts, and the way they just probe being a human. It's a fantastic film. Trevor, take us away.
Indeed. So yes, I've gone through. I've tallied our scores, as we often do. You know, a number 10 ranked movie gets 1 point, all the way down to our number 1s getting 10 points across the 3 of us. So we have, as we often do in these kinds of situations, a few ties. Starting with a tie for number 10. which is Cyrano and Chippendale Rescue Rangers, both coming in at 5 points.
Hell yeah.
Then we have a three-way tie for number 7 with Sonic the Hedgehog, Top Gun Maverick, and Nope, all in there,
Sweet.
1 point higher
Very
with
happy with
6. Our sole number 6 movie is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Our number 5 film,
Top 5.
jumping up to 16 points between Logan and myself, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. And then our number 4, all movies that all three of us enjoyed highly. Number 4 is The Batman with 20 points. Two-way tie for our number 2, 24 points with RRR and Glass Onion: A Knives Out Mystery. And unsurprisingly, coming in at number 1 as 2 of our number 1s and 1 of our number 2 with 29 points, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Absolutely.
So yes, the image that I pulled for our movie of the year ends up being our top 4 movies as well, with Everything Everywhere All at Once, Glass Onion, RRR, and The Batman. I had a sense of what movies really hit for us, and I was glad to see that play out. So yes, shout out to 2022 here in film.
Absolutely, great year.
Top Gun Maverick is definitely one I want to see. One also that none of us saw that I do is very much on my I want to see this movie is largely just for the performance from Brendan Fraser is The Whale. I'm very familiar with the show already because I saw the play that it is based on a number of years ago. So it's one of those I didn't clamor to go see in theaters, but it is very much one that I expect. All the flowers that he's getting for that performance, I'm not surprised at all, and he's another one that I'm glad to see is kind of coming back into the spotlight.
Also,
year, so.
The Fablemans by Steven Spielberg. I haven't had the chance to watch it, but I see my will love, as well as The Banshees of
Inisherin.
With Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell. I am also very excited to see.
Yeah, that's one of I know Martin McDonagh's behind it. I know his stylings. I'm sure it is wonderful as well. So shout out to 2022 in film.
Absolutely.
And our movie of the year, film of the year, Everything Everywhere All at Once. So that is going to do it for this episode. We will hopefully be back next week with our Game of the Year conversation. It'll probably be me, Cameron, and Frank for that conversation, if we can get Frank back available for it. Otherwise, we'll do something else in terms of it. But yes, shout out to our continued of the year coverage, our best of 2022 stuff. So let's go around the metaphorical table and actually, in-person table here for Cameron and I. I follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I do want to give a massive shout out to the Let's Plays that Trevor's been putting up. He recently completed the core game of Skyrim. Go check that out. It is a long legendary Let's Play series.
I stretched it out just long enough to get longer than your Dying Light 2.
Yep.
36 episodes of Skyrim versus your 34 of Dying Light 2. We did a year of very long running things here on that nerdy site. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Logggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to that nerdy site show. Like Trevor said, we're going to have Game of the Year conversations next year. This is obviously Film of the Year. And maybe we'll do some other of the year stuff throughout the rest of January. So stay tuned to all that. Always some good conversations. Maybe we'll have stuff of looking forward to 2023 as well. So yeah, good times always here. Trevor, what are you going to shout out?
Yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will shout out in the conversation of our long running things. I will shout out if you didn't catch it, go check out that Bond show.
Hell yeah.
Our big epic 26 episodes,
26,
25 movies, and then kind of a best of
Wrap
kind of
up,
conversation around the series, spearheaded by Logan and myself, with the occasional guest appearance from Cameron, Frank, Jarrett Jarrett Green joined us for a couple of those episodes, I believe.
Jana was
So
on
yeah.
one.
Yeah. So indeed, go check out That Bond Show over on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. And thank you for joining us for all of this lengthy bit of conversation. Yeah, there should be lots of fun in the year ahead here for 2023. Yeah, you can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest, including any other best of 2022 lists that we put up there. I imagine some of these are going to get written versions. I've definitely got like a big lengthy write-up of a bunch of the movies I saw this year, my extended thoughts on them. If you liked what you heard, please, once again, rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.